Hello, everyone, and thanks for giving us your time today for VR Download. I'm Ian Hamilton in New York, joined today by David Heaney from London in the UploadVR studios as we talk about the next steps in personal computing. We're in Quest 3 headsets today with last generation Meta avatars. We're using hand tracking with built-in microphones, and we've got tablets in front of us, virtual tablets in front of us that show us notes and comments so we can interact with our audience when we're live. Thank you to our patrons for supporting the work we do over on UploadVR.com. In case this is your first time, we've been following VR's development closely for more than a decade, and we expect decades of progress ahead of us. You can become a paying member at UploadVR.com to support our work directly. We thank our patrons by name here on the podcast and listed on the website. That includes XR Developer News, Podum, the developer of Smash Drums, Holonet, Justin Corcoran at Phosphor Studios, Richard Miller, Parmesan, Nick Levac, Qubits, Steve Lucas, David Wyatt, DePonch, Soul Presence, Soul Retreat, and Wim Reigart. Sincerely, all of you, thank you for your support. Hello to everyone out there. Please share where you're watching us from, and hello to our time travelers catching us at different times or speeds, and those of us watching us through a universal translator of some kind into their native language. We just exited Black Friday, and in the weeks ahead, a number of studios are going to find out what their future holds once they see the sales from the Quest store over Christmas. If there's a developer out there you believe in, who you can throw your support behind, please do. If you shout their praises to other people who have headsets and who are ready to spend money on games, it can have a huge impact on an artist out there. All right, David, what do we have today?
Hello, everyone. We have a total of 7 topics today. We're not really going to go in groups this time. This week, no sections. It's all just 7 mostly distinct topics. So we'll start by just briefly discussing Quest headsets getting a second exclusive Avatar Fire and Ash 3D clip. And we'll talk about the obvious question there. Are they going to get the movie? Are we going to get the movie in 3D on Quest anytime soon? Or will it be that Meta gets the clip and Apple is the one that actually offers you the movie? We will then briefly discuss, we had a freelancer visit Meta's LA store to demo Quest headsets and smart glasses. That is a permanent store that Meta has just in the past few weeks opened in West Hollywood. It's got 2 stories. The bottom story is mostly smart glasses. The top one is Quest and the HUD glasses. So we'll discuss that and whether there could be a future retail strategy there. Then we will talk about FluxPose, which is a really interesting development. It could essentially be the spiritual successor to Lighthouse for body tracking. It's a very interesting tracking system that has a lot of advantages. The early testers are saying some very good things about it. And we'll, of course, note that as a Kickstarter campaign, there's all the risk that's involved there. But the technology side of it is very interesting in terms of what it enables. We will then discuss another interesting technological development, GravityXR. So it's a Chinese startup that involves engineers who worked at Meta and Apple and other big tech companies, including some of the people who built the R1 chip at Apple. And they've gone to build this coprocessor that is kind of like the R1, but designed to allow you to offload the main chipset onto an external tethered puck so that this passively cooled computer vision and image processing chipset can live on the headset. And they showed a reference design headset and demoed it at this event in China that is the lightest headset ever. And I saw someone in the comments ask whether the design, the hardware in the thumbnail of this video is smart glasses. Do they have a display? More than anything you've just suggested, this is a full pass-through headset. They have pancake lenses, 2.5K micro OLED displays, and cameras. So we'll get into that and why that very likely hints at the approach that Meta and other companies like Pico are going to take when they presumably ship ultralight headsets late next year. This looks like the technological approach to get from these 500-gram face bricks all the way down to these sleek and light kind of mixed reality glasses or whatever you want to call them. We'll then discuss Meta releasing its smart glasses SDK, which lets phone apps access the cameras of its displayless smart glasses. Specifically, it's available for developers to build with, but not yet to ship in apps. Finally, we will discuss 2 news topics that are more about kind of long-term strategy and some very interesting developments within the industry news. And one of them is that Meta Reality Labs is reportedly facing up to 30% budget cuts next year, up to being a key word there, and reportedly, of course. The other news story is that Apple's head of UI, someone who has been at Apple for almost 2 decades now and led all of their software design for 10 years, since 2015, has left Apple to lead design at Meta Reality Labs. And Mark Zuckerberg has talked about how he's created a new design studio at Meta and is elevating the importance and role of design at the company. And we'll talk about kind of the implications of all of that for smart glasses and VR headsets.
Yeah, I love that we start off right here with the Avatar Fire and Ash clip. I see Earth Witness out there talking about they went searching for it, and you said right in your intro there that we're going to immediately ask, what about the whole movie, and what about buying the whole movie? There's 3 of those movies, actually, that to go and buy, and you can already buy 2 of them, I assume, on Apple Vision Pro. I haven't even checked, but I assume they're both there in 3D to buy. I think they're in my library. It's just, whereas Meta's version of that is going to be our first subject here. And then we're going to build, I think those last 2 subjects are going to be big discussion areas as we start talking about going into 2026. Just want to say hi to Nick, Earth, Arlen, Chris. They're asking us if we're going to talk about that drone. I think that's in our lineup of things we're going to write for the website as we can in the days ahead. I see Mighty Coconut out there. Hello. They just launched Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, which I, of course, have to mention. James, I don't know if James is out there watching, but I know he is working on a bingo board of things we talk about on the show, and you obviously all know that that's going to be one of them. Not Suspicious, if I didn't already call you out, is out there too. They got a bunch of games out there to check out. Just want to say hi to everyone out there. Wind Bar going out to the top of the show. All right, let's talk about this, David.
Yeah, so at Meta Connect, as you'll probably know if you read UploadVR and watch this podcast, Meta and James Cameron released an exclusive 3D clip for Avatar Fire and Ash. Now they've released a second exclusive clip. They've also made available over the past few weeks the trailers, so the official movie trailers that you would see at theaters or in YouTube or something like that, as 3D videos. So there are in total 4 Avatar Fire and Ash 3D videos available on Quest. This is through the Horizon TV app, which is just called TV in Horizon OS. This news itself is not profound, right? Watching a 3-minute clip from a video, it's kind of cool. If you're someone who hasn't watched 3D movies before in your headset, you know, there is no official way to do so on Quest. So maybe you have never done so, right? You can theoretically, do some sort of pirating and bringing files over, or you might have an Apple Vision Pro or have used it. If you haven't, it's a good demo to see what it looks like to have 3D movies in VR. And as we have pointed out many times before, and James Cameron has pointed out many times before, this is kind of the ultimate way to watch 3D movies, because you don't get a lot of these horrible artifacts that you get from 3D cinema. You don't get this kind of reduced brightness and eye strain and kind of all of these weird optical problems that make 3D suck, right? If I am going to the cinema and watching a movie and there's a 2D and a 3D version, I will pick the 2D version, even if it was cheaper. I would not pick the 3D version because there's so many kind of optical trade-offs involved there. So that's kind of why this is important. But for Quest right now, there is no official way to rent or buy 3D movies. You would have to pirate them, which obviously we're not going to condone. But on Apple Vision Pro, there is. Through Apple TV, you can rent and buy movies in 3D. Disney Plus also offers a pretty big selection of movies in 3D. Around a year ago, in fact, almost exactly a year ago, Meta announced this big partnership with James Cameron's new company, Lightstorm Vision. And Lightstorm Vision's goal is to make 3D ubiquitous throughout both cinema and television production. The idea is they want to make it just part of the pipeline, from the cameras to the software to every little bit of the tech stack, so that when you make a movie or a TV show in Hollywood of any kind, they want to make it to be a very small added cost to add 3D to it. So the idea is you just do 3D because why not? It's another kind of way to, get an extra audience for the show or whatever. So that's kind of the partnership there. It's not actually with James Cameron himself. The big question is, when will we actually see real content from this, not just clips? Meta said when the partnership arrived, it would bring world-class 3D entertainment experiences spanning live sports, concert, feature films, and TV series featuring big name IP. We haven't seen anything arrive like that in 3D on Quest yet. It may be that they're waiting for the Ultralight headset next year. It may be that these things just take time to build up the partnerships and ship things. It looks like the new Horizon TV app that was launched a few months ago is preparing for it, right? They obviously have done a big UI revamp that is focused on movies and TV shows, but it's yet to arrive. And for now, it is a little bit kind of strange to go on here and get a clip, not the actual movie itself. Of course, the movie itself isn't out, but there's no indication here that the movie will be available on 3D on Quest.
Oh, there's a lot of things to think about here, and you're kind of getting to some of it. Let's just mention that I think Apple entirely bought outright the F1 movie as like one it brought it into its stable as an Apple Studios project. I don't know, like that. I would be really curious about the legality of that because that movie came out, it released, and then there was a big announcement that Apple bought it. But that movie's premiering in on Apple TV this month within a week. And as I sort of hinted previously, they could do red carpet premieres in a headset with avatars immediately. What I think is interesting is, do you remember, was F1 filmed in 3D at all, or was it filmed in IMAX, or both?
I don't think it's available in 3D. I haven't seen any indication of that. I watched it on Vision Pro, actually, on one of the recent flights. It was either Valve or Samsung, but it was not in 3D.
You make me panic inside my heart as you talk about those trips. Now that we're able to talk. Like, I mean, oh yeah, we're okay. We're able to talk about them right now. But yeah, so you rented it? You straight up rented off of the store? Wow.
There was no 3D option available for either purchase or buy, so I don't think it's strange, but I don't think they did.
What was the aspect ratio? And did you get any kind of like IMAX aspect ratio shots?
That's a good question. I don't recall off the top of my head, but it definitely was not 3D, which is the important part, right? Which it is crazy, as you say, it was an Apple movie, right? It was not just, I think they bought it from the very start, right? They made it. It was an Apple TV movie, and yet they haven't done 3D there, which is very surprising, actually. But they did do, obviously, that very short immersive clip of driving around with Brad Pitt for 1 minute. I think maybe this is one of those things where let's look and see what Apple's next flagship movie, whether it has 3D or not.
Well, I guess just the reason I was going to make that distinction, I appreciate you getting there, and I've been holding off on the purchase of the movie or the renting of the movie just to get the freebie out of my Apple TV subscription, as it's got this premiere date on Apple TV. But I would love to watch that with people in VR, and having people sit next to me and watch a 2D movie on an IMAX screen is a little bit easier to do, I think, technically, than us all synced up watching a 3D movie. But I could be wrong on that.
There shouldn't be any difference in that. There's no technical limitation. If you have the co-watching system, I'm sure you've done it. You can watch 3D movies with someone on Apple Vision Pro already.
Well, sometimes
you can do today since launch.
It's the Apple immersive ones, the ones that are really the 180-degree ones. They usually go into like a walkie-talkie almost mode with your friends, where you get an audio-only connection mode. You lose their avatar entirely in Apple immersive 180-degree 3D movies, and at some point under that, you can share all the spaces with people. But anyways, I love this distinction, right? Is Meta going to make movies is my question, right? Like full movies. If you say that they went out and made the F1 movie, they put significant dollars into the upfront. Like James Cameron is now, essentially finishing up the Avatar movies in the next few years, right? Like he could hand off the last one and he's like, what am I going to do next? He's getting kind of up there in the years. Is Meta going to help fund his next projects? Is that what we're looking at here?
It's an interesting proposition. What we've heard so far was there was that report from the Wall Street Journal claiming that Meta is in talks with Disney and A24 to try and buy some content for this Ultralight headset, to try and bring some things over and get some exclusives. It seems to me that it would be far more sensible and likely for Meta to make these Hollywood partnerships. Apple has obviously been successful in spinning up its streaming service to a degree. There are still reports that this is not a profitable business for Apple. Essentially, a lot of their success there is the fact that they're able to kind of pre-bundle this and advertise it. Some people have been frustrated by the in-OS ads in iOS and macOS saying, subscribe to Apple TV Plus. That's not something Meta has. The economics don't make sense yet for the Quest market. So I think it's far more likely that they try to make partnerships. And again, I think it's really key to understand that this Lightstorm Vision partnership with James Cameron, it's very much so about making it so that for any movie already being made, it's trivial to make it in 3D as well, just as you might, make it in 4K. And sure, maybe most distribution is 1080p, most streaming subscription services, for example. But the idea here is that they make it so easy to make it 3D that by default, you watch it on your TV, it's 2D. You watch it in your headset, it's 3D. It should be, if James Cameron gets his way and his vision and his goal here, that everything is just 3D by default because Lightstorm Vision makes it so easy as part of a Hollywood production.
Yeah, there was that he gave a talk, and go see a couple podcasts and a couple talks that he's given with Andrew Bosworth, the CTO at Meta, right here, and he's talking about eye tracking. I think at some point there, the need to know where people are looking in the frame, and it's really interesting to think about that. The thing I'm sort of struggling with is there's the Encounter Dinosaurs experience on Apple. And you can tell that that project is related to the dinosaur documentary projects that are also airing as part of the Apple TV subscription program. And then there's several big budget, 180-degree 3D projects already having been run. They've already tested over like 2 years of in-production content for the Vision Pro and learned a lot of things from those productions. Meta did that years ago and then walked away, and those people like aren't there anymore, or that experience isn't relevant because they did 360-degree movies, not 180-degree movies and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think it's a more likely proposition that Meta would perhaps make its own 180-degree 3D movies. So we're not talking anymore about just taking a regular rectangular production and adding a stereoscopic camera. We're talking about a completely different, immersive video, in the same way that Apple got, the director of All Quiet on the Western Front to make that short film Submerged. And now it's obviously got a lot of music content out there. It's got documentaries. Meta's done some of that, right? There was that Red Bull production in 360 that Meta funded, and they have a few other series, but none of them have really quite broken out. None of them have really been these kind of giant productions. I could very much so see Meta spinning up an internal studio to do 180-degree immersive video, 3D for this Ultralight headset especially, but of course all Quest headsets. And perhaps that would, be a partnership with James Cameron, because right now our understanding is that this is primarily focused on rectangular 3D, sorry, but it's unclear how much of that is, because with rectangular 2D, you can bring in, as I keep saying, existing content, right? You can just, whatever big movie someone is making for $500 million, you slap 3D onto it. When it comes to immersive 3D, it's only for your headsets, and that's why, the scope's there. But we should see next year, I would be shocked if we didn't see Meta's equivalent to Submerged, for example. They pay a big name director to go and do something interesting, experimental with 180-degree 3D cameras. And I think we'll probably hear about that at the launch of the Ultralight headset. They will want to have a content lineup. That's the Wall Street Journal's talking about, them talking to Disney and A24 and so on, to get content for the launch of this headset.
Throw out a weird idea here. It's kind of sound a little futuristic right now, but there's all there's multiple layers of scanning technology that Meta has rolled out. Was it the Socio-Opticon they called that that rig that was basically like a light stage, but also with cameras for scanning people in motion. Imagine being able to scan yourself and all your clothing and become an actor in a film, right? I wonder if Meta can get there with its technology. If you imagine the end dream of codec avatars, it isn't just to do this as codec avatars. It would be to do what I just described. It would be to star in an action film from wherever you are, just wearing your headset and the avatar of choice for that week, right? You can change your costume in a second. That's the dream. But can Meta get there in 2026 or 2027? And where will Apple be on those precise same delivery dates as a platform?
Yeah, I guess there's two things here. When you talk about stuff that's rendered in real time, You can either talk about using VR as essentially a mocap technology. The reality is that the studios already have great mocap tech, and you would just be talking about lowering the cost. It would more be about letting anyone make their own movie like this, like letting anyone make their own avatar. That will require full body tracking on a headset. That's something Meta doesn't offer. If they do get to full body tracking at some point in the future, then you start seeing those use cases. The other one is just talking about everything we're talking about so far is a video recorded. The other one is an interactive story where you're in the movie. Well, that's essentially a VR game, right? That is, Batman Arkham Shadow. That's Deadpool VR, but with kind of less game mechanics. A lot of that was explored in the Rift and the Vive era of 2016. You need to have a very, very compelling story to make up for the lack of interactivity. You could argue something like ILM X Labs Vader Immortal was something like that, right? It's a movie that you're a part of. You also need to make that really, really compelling. The less interactivity you have in a virtual experience, the better the graphics need to be, is something I think is kind of at play here. It's a lot of fun to play in even the most graphically simplistic game if you have constant hand interactions, right? Job Simulator is a example there. Super hot. You can pistol whip. There's so many games that have very, very simplistic graphics, but have amazing gameplay. The less gameplay you have, the more you're passively taking in the world, the pretty more realistic that world has to be. So that requires feature hardware.
Yeah.
Really
Okay.
compelling.
You nailed something there. That's a really interesting way. So what the example I was going to bring up was watching The Hobbit at 48 frames per second in theaters. And I remember reading the reviews written by critics at the time, as well as because I wanted to compare my own experience of doing that. And you notice how fake and plastic the sets look. And when you see digital effects, you can see mistakes in the digital effects that weren't relevant, that weren't like visible at the lower frame rate. So like there's a beautiful scene early in The Hobbit that I love. Even you can hate on those movies all you want, but the songs are really fun, and especially those first songs in the first movie are really fun. And they're all cleaning up the plates from Bilbo's party, and they're throwing the plates to one another. And I have a distinct memory, the kind of distinct memory I have of VR experiences, because of the added frame rate that I was provided watching the Hobbit film in theaters. And unfortunately, it was a bad memory. The memory was, this looks fake, right? This doesn't look right, this animation, right? And so like you're kind of describing the same thing. When we talk about the Submerged film that was funded by Apple, Apple actually spent an extraordinary amount of money, and I asked Apple if they would give me the budget of the film, and they would not say, to provide real metal sets, real metal shiny objects all through that scene. So now you're sitting there in 180 degrees watching this 3D film, and all of the objects are shiny like they were actually in service back on an actual submarine back in the day. A little touch of detail, like not just that thing. Imagine all the fabric, all the costumes, all the lining, all the seams that you see, all those things that you would just never perceive on this little itty bitty frame flat across the screen are now taking you out of the action. It's expensive, is what I'm going for.
Yeah, exactly. With immersive video, you cannot get away with kind of low effort CGI or fake sets. It's kind of a hyper version of what happened with broadcast television with the move from standard definition to high definition, where a lot of the shows at the time had to redo sets. They had to redo, makeup, and they had to redo prosthetics because everything did just look so fake as soon as they put a HD camera onto it. So this is something that has happened before, and there are massive issues with making immersive video content. Not just because you have to control this entire 180-degree frame, but because, as you say, things will look fake. I think let's move on to, unless we have anything else to say on this, we want to kind of move through the show here and get to our next topic about the store.
Yep. I just wanted to mention Mighty Coconut's quote here from Vincent van Gogh: accurate drawing, accurate color is perhaps not the essential thing to aim at, because the reflection of reality in a mirror, if it could be caught, color and all, would not be a picture at all. All right, let's talk about Meta's Los Angeles store, David.
Yeah, this is one we just want to note because we had a freelancer go there. Obviously, neither of us is going to go all the way to Los Angeles just to check this out, but we did report on the fact that Meta has launched this permanent store. They already had one store in Burlingame, California, right next to their campus. But this is obviously a much more significant launch, as this is in West Hollywood, in a massive city, LA, not just beside, Meta HQ. This is a permanent store. It is quite big. You can see from the photos. It has 2 floors. The bottom floor is primarily concerned with the displayless smart glasses, and then the top store is for Quest and the Meta Ray-Ban display. So on the bottom floor, they have gone with, I'm told this is very appropriate to the theme of West Hollywood, this kind of fingerboarding, skateboarding theme, where you kind of pick up the glasses and play around with these little like finger skateboards and take videos. They also sell the limited edition of the regular Ray-Ban Meta glasses, the transparent one that some people seem to like. I really dislike it personally, but some people seem to go crazy over this one that has this transparent, clear view of the electronics, kind of like the 2000s era. They also have the ability to go in and get a demo of the smart glasses with your prescription. So this is something that we often talk about being vital at Apple stores. Well, Meta has this prescriptions check-in where they take your prescription and then they put together your glasses with your correct prescription. And while you're waiting, they have decided that they have a little cafe where they sell, according to our freelancer, admittedly overpriced food and drinks, but I think perhaps some of the clientele in West Hollywood may not care too much about things like the price, depending on who they are. So while you're waiting, you can get this kind of beverage, and then they will put together the smart glasses you wanted to test with your correct prescription. And you can see some of the kind of show case here. What's interesting to me is that the design language here is not a direct copy of Apple. Obviously, the entire idea is obviously heavily inspired by Apple stores. Apple was the first kind of modern consumer electronics company to have this idea of owning its own store like this. But it does have its own distinct design language that isn't just a like-for-like copy. A lot of the Chinese companies you see in China that launch their Apple Store equivalent, it looks, the exact same, with the same wood and the same kind of plaques and things like that. We have some other photos here just so we breeze through this, of the top floor.
Are these uniforms, David? Jeans and white shirts? Are those just in the last one, last image? Or is that just those people visiting?
Are they uniforms, or are they just people deciding to wear the same thing? I don't think we got any images of the uniforms. I don't think, the freelancer wanted to just take photos of people. It's a good question. It could just be a coincidence. I don't know enough about West Hollywood to know how people dress there, so I don't know. Yeah, going upstairs, you can see the Quest headsets on display here. You can also see the accessories that they sell, and all of this is available to demo. They're upstairs. They demo Beat Saber or Batman Arkham Shadow, so you get 2 very, very different VR choices there. Both VR, notably, and not mixed reality, but one is obviously, Beat Saber, we all know, and one is kind of Batman Arkham Shadow. And apparently the store employees are saying, for anyone who's considering Batman, they kind of say, have you used VR? Don't use this as your first experience. If you're experienced with VR, then maybe you're coming from an older headset or a PlayStation VR, or you've used it at a friend's house, they say, sure, you can try Batman. So you can see all of the standard accessories here, right? The case and the different colored pads. It's the same kind of thing you expect from, I think that's like one of the Razer.
The not AirPods.
Yeah, but they go into the USB-C port, so they're not Bluetooth. They are very low latency, high quality.
It's a little dongle right there. Yeah, okay,
exactly. It's designed to just snap into the USB-C port and
pass-through power.
It's a good question. I don't know on those ones. I know one of them did. I can't sort of see this in enough detail. I think I see the one here as well. Another design. You can see the straps. These are everything you expect from going into a store for a company like this. And then, of course, our final image we have to show you all here is the Meta Ray-Ban display. Our freelancer, this was their first time trying out the Meta Ray-Ban display, and they found that their prescription was out of the range. So we covered this before, but it only goes from -4 to +4 because these are not snap-on prescriptions for Meta Ray-Ban display. This is, bonded at the time of manufacturing. If you order these with a prescription, it will take, 4 to 8 weeks to get it. So they obviously have a bunch here in the store for different prescriptions, but even if they did have every possible one, it's outside the range of the freelancer. So that's something we want to just repeat, that is going to be a big problem here. Even if you have, all of this on display and all of these employees who are trained to give this demo, This is still a product that isn't really suitable for everyone's eyes for not just the binocular reason, but for the prescription reason. So I don't think we have too much to say about this. I just wanted to show the images and talk through the fact that this exists. We don't know if there are plans to launch other stores. There is a temporary pop-up in New York and in Las Vegas, but that is temporary, whereas this store is permanent. This is Meta's first permanent retail store in a major city. And that's why we wanted to just quickly discuss it.
Yeah, very interesting to see that. I wanted to go to the New York one and see how it differs from this experience. I curious what they do next in this arena. I've going back to taking these last two subjects together. Apple bought Spaces, I believe. I don't know if I can't remember if they confirmed it. I think maybe they confirmed it, but they bought the company that made a really cool piece of what we use in FaceTime. So they basically figured out how to do FaceTime in VR. But before that, they had built a store in the Irvine Spectrum where you could go in. This is down in Orange County, where they have Microsoft stores and Apple stores. You could go down and have a Terminator experience, a full-fledged Terminator Salvation experience. I think it was themed after Terminator Salvation. You went in there in the front, you scanned your face, you strapped trackers to your body, you got a gun in your hand, you put the headset on, you had a backpack on, and then you stepped onto a platform that vibrated as you were dealing with Terminators in the future and transporting yourself into the future and back. And they had the whole end-to-end experience here of going to a physical location, strapping yourself in, having a fully immersive VR experience, and then coming out worked out. And like, I've always wondered, are we ever going to see that in an Apple store? Like, are they ever going to go there and do that? And yeah, you can go in there today and sit down and have a guided iPad tour of a seated experience. But there's no one learning guitar over there with a headset, and there's no one, playing Beat Saber or some equivalent over there in another corner. And that's the kind of thing I would expect at a Meta store as well over time.
Yeah, if any of you that are watching or listening are in LA, or you can travel to LA or will be traveling in LA, please go and do this demo yourself and tell us what you thought of it. We'd love to hear different perspectives of, did you get to do the Beat Saber one or the Batman Arkham Shadow? Did you do the Meta Ray-Ban display one? What did you think of this compared to an Apple store? I see some people in the comments calling it like very hipsterish, and I think that's very much so true. I think that's, for me, that's the most fascinating part of this, that it does have this kind of very distinct design language that is not a direct kind of carbon copy. Just before we move off this, I'm going to need to go and turn off a beeping appliance. So if you want to maybe talk about Walkabout Mini Golf, the new course, for example, or something like that for the next minute or so, I will be right back.
Yeah, sure. I was just seeing the people in the comments talking about all the exclusives, and not just the exclusives, but other games that are currently only on the MetaQuest store. Like, they're exclusive only because there's no other store to put them on right now. We're going to deal with a piracy issue as soon as Steam Frame and other headsets like it are trying to pull away people from the Quest market. So there are an extraordinary number of really great pieces of content that are available only on the Quest store right now. And as mentioned, they're sort of tied to the Quest ecosystem right now. But it's going to be on the developers to bring those over one at a time and choose how they want their Steam storefront listing to look in comparison to their Quest storefront listing, because what's happening when Steam Frame hits the market is going to completely change the market. The question is, if the devs take too long to do that, what are users going to do with piracy and ripping the meta layers out of some of these games to try to get them onto other headsets? We don't, as David mentioned, we don't support that, and that's taking money out of devs' pockets who desperately need it to survive. So, like, I want to talk about that thing happening in the comments here, because I think it's going to be a pressure on a lot of people next year as soon as Steam Frame is starting to come around.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about FluxPose then. This is a really interesting one that I think has so much potential. And like all Kickstarter campaigns, we have to, encourage caution. The thing we always say just to start off is that if you're not aware of this, a Kickstarter pledge is not legally a pre-order. A company that you have Kickstarter pledged for has no legal obligation to actually provide you with the product. So keep that in mind. It's not a pre-order. That said, this is a very interesting design from a company very interesting technology from a company that's been working on this for around 5 years now. It's a Spanish startup. And their goal here is essentially to be the new VR body tracking technology of choice, replacing Steam VR Lighthouse. And this comes at a time where Valve has just obviously announced Steam Frame that has no support for Lighthouse tracking. There was obviously speculation before it was announced that maybe it will be optionally supported, or maybe on day one there'll be some sort of like Lighthouse attachment. It's yet to be seen if Valve does that at one point, but they did confirm to us that the index hardware is no longer in production, and that obviously includes the base stations. So it does seem that Valve itself has moved on from Lighthouse tracking. And while there are obviously companies like HTC still manufacturing base stations, HTC has put up the price of that in recent times. And there is a space and a demand for something new, right? Lighthouse tracking it's seen a version 2.0, obviously, around the release of Index, but it has been, around for around 10 years now. And it doesn't have to be the end all and be all for body tracking. We talk often about, computer vision solutions, but there are also potential for other approaches, and FluxPose is one of them. So, the ability for these headsets like Quest and Apple Vision Pro and Steam Frame to let you jump into VR and set everything up in a matter of seconds and have full portability, no base stations mounted, just put on the headset and it does computer vision inside out tracking. It's great. It's amazing in so many ways. However, cameras on a headset have a very poor view of your body. So we have seen some very, basic inside out body tracking from Meta, for example, the inside out upper body tracking. If you want to extend that to lower body tracking, it's theoretically possible, but it's not. Your quality is never really going to be perfect there, especially as headsets get slimmer and slimmer, which is fighting against your goal of seeing more of your body. If you want robust, kind of always active body tracking for different body parts, inside out from the headset is not going to be ideal. So here comes FluxPose. FluxPose is kind of designed with the assumption that your headset will already do its own position tracking. So it's not about tracking the headset, it's about tracking your body parts relative to it. So FluxPose is not an optical system at all. It's electromagnetic. It has trackers that sense the magnetic field generated by a base station. And so the company describes it as the first affordable, truly portable, occlusion-free tracking solution with absolute positioning. And we'll break down exactly what that means. So I guess first, why even replace Lighthouse in the first place? Well, one is that Valve has kind of abandoned it. The other is that the base stations are very expensive. I think HTC now sells them for $200 each. So it's $400 for just your base stations. And that's for two. Lighthouse is also an optical system. It is optical. It's laser sweep, but that's optical. So it's affected by occlusion. If someone's standing between you and a base station, if your body part happens to be at the wrong angle, there are often going to be times where your tracking breaks. That's why many enthusiasts buy a third or a fourth base station. And there's another big issue that is not really brought up enough, which is that Lighthouse completely falls apart in a room that has highly reflective surfaces. If you have a mirror in your room, Lighthouse is often just going to be catastrophic in terms of the failures as soon as you're anywhere in that vicinity. So there is onus to get something new. There is kind of potential here, and that's sort of FluxPose's goal. So if you are someone who's been around in VR for a very long time, one of the kind of OGs, and you've followed this for a while, or maybe you just kind of have an interest in looking back on some of these technologies, you'll know that the idea of electromagnetic tracking is not new to this industry. In fact, the first widely used 6DoF VR controller that people were using, myself included, with the Oculus developer kits well over a decade ago now, right, from 12 years ago, was the Razer Hydra. And if you're not familiar with what the Razer Hydra was, it was this little kind of base station that would sit on your desk that had two tracked controllers coming out of it with a cable tethered tracked controllers. This really sounds like a back in my day anecdote, with this kind of 4-foot cable. And so, yeah, I have like a picture here from our archives. Not sure what the context is, but here's an image. So you see that these track controllers, they were 6DoF, right? These are 6DoF controllers, but they were inherently limited by this cable. And it wasn't just that this was done, for some reason that the wireless connection couldn't be done. In many ways, this was a way of working around some of the fundamental issues of electromagnetic tracking, because magnetic fields like this decay with the cube of the distance. So the further away the controllers that are sensing the magnetic field get from the base station that's emitting it, the worse the tracking will get, not as the square of the distance, like with other tracking technologies, but with the cube. So really any distance, and everything starts to get jittery and inaccurate. So the company that actually built the technology behind Razer Hydra, STEM, it used to be called like the STEM motion system or something like that. They, in 2013, again, anyone who was around will kind of be jaded by this. They launched this giant Kickstarter for their STEM tracking system. 6sense was the company, 6sense motion controller. They launched the Kickstarter for the 6sense STEM tracking system. And it was supposed to be, this was before Lighthouse had even been revealed, by the way. It was supposed to be the ultimate solution for VR, right? Occlusion-free tracking. You would be able to put objects on anything you wanted. But the big fundamental problem with 6sense STEM was that it was trying to put the base station still on this desk. So the base station with STEM stayed on the desk, but you got rid of the wire. So you're trying to do this at a long distance. And this was catastrophic, okay? The project was fundamentally technologically flawed, especially the consumer cost and all the goals they were trying to do. They had other engineering details. Essentially, after years of delays and catastrophe, it fell apart and they canceled it in 2018.
David, for what year was the Kickstarter originally? 2013. So this was, I believe this provided me my first 6DoF experience. So I strapped the dev kit for one of these to my chest, and then it used the magnetic connector here to know where I was relative. I told it that my chest right here is where my headset location was, and now I could lean back and forth and feel a little bit like, I could go to Tuscany and I could look down over the railing like this, left and right. And this provided me that. And so you could understand why a bunch of people would be like psyched if that was their, if it, like, oh yeah, like this provided me 6DoF. 6DoF is the way to go.
Yeah, that's a very sort of prescient way to put it, because you realize that you could work around this distance limitation by attaching the emitter, the base station, the generator, the electromagnetic field generator to your body. And so that is actually the fundamental design of FluxPose. So it gets around this issue that STEM had, where it was supposed to be a base station on your desk that was doing this long distance electromagnetic tracking. This is something that can be done at very, very high cost for medical systems. You cannot do that. Fundamental physics means that that's not going to happen for consumer. You're not going to get consumer long distance electromagnetic tracking. It's a fantasy. FluxPose accepts that from the start and builds their system around it. So with FluxPose, the base station, the generator, is on your hip. It is your hip tracker. It's this central one here. If I can maybe bring up the size comparison image, that will make for a little more context. It's the generator and it attaches to your hip. So everything is tracked relative to your hip. And that obviously has to include then the headset itself. So you have headset mounts per headset. They're making them for every major headset. They say they'll make one for Steam Frame that attach this little tracker onto your headset. It becomes a tracked object. Your headset is still doing the positional tracking in the room, right? Your headset is still figuring out, where am I? Even if you have controllers, they're doing it too. But now you have a relative position from the base station on your hip to the headset, and you have a relative position from the base station to the trackers. And the trackers in particular are remarkably light, okay? They are, according to FluxPose, 15 grams. That's 1/5 of the weight of a HTC Vive tracker. So they're 1/5 of the weight. And despite this, they have a little monochrome OLED display on them that shows you kind of status. You can say like, which one's my, left leg tracker, my right leg tracker, my elbow, wherever you happen to be putting it. This is not a sticker. These are little monochrome OLED displays and haptics, all at 15 grams. This is, again, remarkable because all of these little things are doing is they're just sensing a magnetic field. The hard part is in the generator itself. But again, it's the one attached to your hip where it doesn't really matter so much about weight, right? You would much rather have the heavy part if you have to have something heavier on your hip where you can put it on your belt, for example, than have it on, your leg or your wrist. So this is a really, really interesting solution. They're claiming a real world accuracy of less than 5 millimeters, which compares to the roughly less than 2 millimeters of lighthouse tracking. And then they have multiple power modes for the update rate between 50 hertz and 300 hertz. So you can prioritize battery life or precision. So on the normal mode, they say that the base station will last, again, base station, remember this is hip tracker, you could also call it, last for about 12 hours. On the low power mode, which is meant for like if you're just lying down or something like that in say VR chat, you can do 24 hours. And then if you have this high precision mode, which is meant for putting these trackers onto gloves, because you can obviously just attach them onto something like gloves or a controller. You can turn anything into a controller by putting these tiny little 15-gram trackers on them. They say that mode will last for 6 hours, so the really high precision mode. So all of these devices, as you can see on screen, charge on this dock, which comes with the product. And so this dock is providing both the charging and it is the wireless dongle. So you connect this into your PC does the charging and then the data over USB-C. So it's kind of this kind of very integrated, consumerized solution without having to do things like, separately USB-C charge all your Vive trackers. These are clear. This is a project made by people who want full body tracking in VR chat, who want it to be as seamless as possible. So you're not attaching anything to your wall. You're not having, these heavy trackers you're individually charging. They all slot into this. You put this one in your hip. These ones you attach with the straps. Pricing wise, I'll bring up their kind of Kickstarter pricing. This is before tax and this is in euro. Roughly, you're talking for the core kit here, $500-ish. They say that price will go up after the Kickstarter. They say that the headset adapter is included. You pick your headset and they send you the kind of, again, back to this image, the mount to attach it onto your specific headset. And then, you put the middle one on your hip, the other one's elsewhere. So very clever solution. And remember, folks, this is occlusion free. They do a very funny demo where they're wearing like a poncho, for example, and still under this poncho, you have tracking. You even could use it outside because it's portable. You could actually do warehouse scale body tracking here, which is something we really need to point out. The tracking field here is around 5 feet, but it's from your body. Your body is the radius. As you move, the tracking moves with you. It's as if you have this bubble that theoretically supports unlimited trackers with zero occlusion problems surrounding you. And so just to conclude here, they say they've already built 300 devices for early testers. You can go to some VR chat content creators and see that they are very happy about this. They really are liking them. It is surprisingly for a Kickstarter company being very realistic about shipping. They say that they expect to ship the early bird units in August and for most backers in October. That's a lot more realistic than a lot of Kickstarters that start telling you, oh, we're going to ship next month. They're not, when then they end up not doing so. So obviously, I want to repeat that a Kickstarter backing is not a pre-order. Many hardware startups have come and gone with big promises and failed to deliver. That said, I think this is a clever technological solution. Putting it on your hip is a very clever solution to the electromagnetic distance problem. They clearly have thought a lot about this product from an end-to-end UX perspective. These trackers, again, this is a to-scale image, to be clear. This Xbox controller isn't here for fun. This is to scale. These are tiny trackers that are giving you true 6-DoF occlusion-free tracking. We will be very curious to test it out and see how this Kickstarter pans out. But I think this is the first project that has come along that seems like it could actually be the spiritual successor to Lighthouse tracking for body tracking.
I'll encourage you to wait before backing. So David gave you one angle on just be careful on backing, but I'm just going to go out there and say that you should wait for our hands-on impressions before backing almost anything in that category of like crowdfunding. We have a good track record here, I think, of looking at things like Visor and assessing them for what they are and what our actual hands-on experience was, and sort of telling people quite plainly, if you go and throw your money at this effort. This is what we experienced. And we don't have that here with FluxPose yet. And I really want us to have that as soon as possible. But then again, this is still given. What I'm remembering is I don't know if Kyle is in the audience of our of this episode in particular right now, but he was. Anytime I would go to a conference where the 6sense guys were there, I was expected to go and find them in a corner and say, "Hey, what is going on with your Kickstarter project, and what is going on with delivery here?" And I don't like I didn't back that back in the day in 2013, but Kyle and I think a bunch of other people really did. And as you pointed out, they're still salty about it all these years later. So I need to throw that out there that like 10 years, like I want the AirTag solution of this. I don't necessarily, even if this is a really solution, this is a solution, not a user solution in my eyes.
I mean, what is the difference between if you're imagining a little puck that's AirTag size and weight that you attach to things and gives you 6-DoF tracking? Isn't this it, right? Is it not it? On the 6sense thing, yeah, it was kind of the immersed before immersed, if we want to put it into a modern context. I would still say that 6sense, because it went on from 2013 to 2018, 5 years of people asking for refunds and what's happening, was probably the biggest calamity Kickstarter in the history of VR. But of course, there were a lot less people involved in VR in general back then. But
I think that's what I'm trying to get at is like we are talking to a different audience now than we were
sure.
back then.
But I think that it did leave a lasting skepticism of electromagnetic tracking. But again, the problem is 6sense was trying to do it at distance. It's fundamentally a massively different problem. FluxPose is honest here. They're saying that this just doesn't work outside of 5 feet radius. No, that doesn't matter for body tracking. But the thing is, if you're trying to build a general purpose tracking system with electromagnetism, you do run into these problems. But this is a focused product. It's focused on tracking things that are within your body bubble radius, right? Your kind of arm span radius. Within that constraint, you can build this product. As soon as you start to say, coming into your AirTag thing and being kind of more generous to that, as soon as you start to talk about tracking beyond your arm span, then electromagnetic tracking is not the right solution, and you start to get a very different kind of approach required. But that's why I think I am again optimistic about this. It's not overpromising. It's a constrained solution. It's kind of like when we talk about Tilt 5. It's saying, here's what the technology can't do, but if we constrain it to this domain, it can do this. So let's build a cool product around this.
So there's the product from Sony that is really interesting. I've got it in my house. It's a lot to use, and that's why it makes sense that they're targeting this at VR chat users first. That would be the first use case for this. What I'm saying is that millions and millions of users doing full body tracking need a reason to do full body tracking, right? Number one. And it's not necessarily VR chat. It is for the people who are currently in VR chat, but it's not just I suddenly have a full body, now I'm going to use VR chat. It doesn't work that way, right? And I don't where I'm trying to go with this is it's not just a hardware problem, it's also almost equally a software problem. And until the software at the like OS level is just I snap it on this leg, I snap it on this leg, I snap it on this foot, and I'm there. It's going to be a limited subset of the user base.
Sure. I think it comes down to what we say about Big Screen Beyond and the likes, where it's okay for something to be a niche product. This is going to be sold to primarily VR chat users. The vast majority of buyers of this, I think I can say this with strong confidence, are going to be people who want to use it in VR chat. And when you are using it in, to be clear, PC VR chat, this is kind of plug and play, right? You snap them on, your PC is already set up, it's setting the USB-C data through. When you start talking about, does it create a market for other body tracking? No, of course it doesn't. For body tracking to be used widely in VR games, you're going to need there to be headset level support built in. It needs to be either the product comes with body tracking in the box, or it does it with some sort of like inside out body tracking system from the future.
And haptics too, right? We also, if for any VR game, you might also want a haptic effect at wherever your body is tracked as well.
Sure. This, just to be clear, these do have haptics. That's one of the things I'd say is remarkable. This is the first one that does. At 15 grams, these have 6-DoF tracking and haptics. So I think, again, very interesting technology here. We'll have to see how it pans out. A couple of comments here I just wanted to kind of get into there. I see Mindweaver agreeing with you, saying that AirTags are much smaller. They're not actually that much smaller. I think you're overestimating the scale of this image. Go and look at the scale on their Kickstarter, and you can see these things are actually very, very small. They're not, AirTags are still smaller, absolutely, but they're not 6DoF. AirTags are, well, they are, but not within a very good accuracy. AirTags are with your ultra wideband chip, like 1 meter to 2 meters. This is 5 millimeters. You're talking about 2 orders of magnitude.
But you can't flip it into like a high accuracy mode and hone in on it, right? But it's a flipped problem.
I'm saying that is 1 meter, that high accuracy. Or maybe it's like centimeters on the scale of centimeters. It's still not millimeters, right? I think it might be at the very best scenario, something like 10 centimeters. We're talking, this is to do 6DoF tracking like this, it's a millimeter.
It's just it's flipping the problem where I need to identify an object in my environment that within 10 centimeters of accuracy versus I need my head and body within 1 millimeter of accuracy, or I start feeling nauseated or uncomfortable.
Well,
every minute.
It's more than that. If you want to bring an object into VR, say you want to use a tracked object of some sort, and you want to just slap, like your idea is you slap an AirTag on your table tennis racket, right? In theory. You can't do that with ultra wideband. Your table tennis racket is going to be, within this kind of radius. It's not going to feel like it's in your hand. It's going to feel like it's kind of floating in a weird kind of soup in your hand, for lack of a better analogy here. It's like you need sub centimeter and ideally a couple of millimeters at most precision to make it actually feel like you're holding the object. Otherwise it's not going to be held in your hand, right? You're muted.
Fill in your bingo cards. You're describing, if you add optical to that as the correction system, then you have a best of both worlds solution where when the hand exits the visual field of view of the devices, it gets picked up with that wobbliness, but when the wobbliness starts, when it stops its backward motion and begins its forward motion, that's when the begin of a throw begins. And you can start doing your math on what a throw looks like better because of the extra AirTag, because you're wearing an AirTag on your left wrist and an Apple Watch on your right wrist.
Sure. The other problem with ultra wideband, it's not just the lack of precision. It's actually very high energy, so you can't do it at a high update rate. Even if we're talking about this 10 centimeter with the ultra wideband for an AirTag, you're still talking about doing this at like 1 or 5 hertz, right? Like this is 550 to 500 hertz. So it's about, do you want your table tennis racket to go doop, 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 or do you want it to go zoop?
No, but you're exactly right. But it's still, when I've talked to these problems with the hand tracking devs, right, where they're trying to figure out the velocity of your hand from the frame here to here, of you moving your hand from here. They're going to guess the entire performance of your throwing in this space based on the velocity that it detects between those two frames when it first comes into view. Now you're just giving it an extra 60 frames of prediction. And yes, it's a little wobbly, but as soon as it gets to the front frames, it flips to optical again.
No, it's not 60. It's 1 hertz. It's 1 time per second. It's
so you get one reading from here to here.
Yeah, it's because it's so high energy.
Yeah, got it.
The other thing is,
still, it's one more.
But you don't need it, because if you have a physical object there, you already have the IMU, the accelerometer and gyroscope. It's all VR controllers, Pico trackers. These things all do what you're saying already. The optical systems, in many cases, for something your touch controllers, it only is maybe 30 or 60 hertz. But what happens at 1,000 hertz, the update you're talking about, when I take my touch controller out of view and move it like this, what you're describing happens. They do this kind of extrapolation from the accelerometer, because it's saying this is accelerating at this speed, and then you can integrate that to get velocity and integrate that again to get distance. So if you already have the accelerometer and an optical system, adding on ultra wideband is not the solution. Ultra wideband is perfect for finding your keys. It's not a good idea for VR tracking.
No, for VR tracking, no. We're going to argue in terminology here. We got to... yes, I'm saying that the problem I need solved is that a tennis racket, any old tennis racket, feels like it is getting hit by a tennis ball at the correct time and also that my high-speed tennis move that I'm really swinging the racket as fast as possibly can is picked up a little bit better than as currently tracked by these whatever the hertz rate of these cameras are. If you can improve that by even 5% or 10% over the static, just inside out thing, right? Okay, another example, my feet. I need my foot to feel like it has a soccer ball tapped against the tip of the toe only. And I only need it to be, right, that little tippy tap haptic. It doesn't need to be a solid haptic. So it doesn't need to be a big VR controller, is what I'm saying.
And what I'm telling you is, if you want to do that, you could use a Pico tracker. Could do what you're talking about today. You could put one of these things on your foot. You don't. But it's not ultra wideband. It is an accelerometer and gyroscope plus some IR LEDs. Because if that's the right solution here. And then for FluxPose, if you want to go a little bit bigger, add some haptics to a Pico tracker, and you have what you're saying. I don't think it's a bad idea. It's a great idea to be able to strap a tracker on. I'm just saying ultra wideband is not the technology for it. It's not suitable technology. I think let's go to
GravityXR next, right?
Yeah,
I saw
let's
someone in
see
our
if we have any.
comments was excited about that one as a comparison to where we were just talking about before as like 10 years of progress. Now we're talking about this.
Sure, let's just see some of the comments here from people's view on FluxPose. Let's see here. Nick Teeter is saying that they would get more use out of the haptics than the full body tracking. Yeah, I guess you get both with the FluxPose, right? You could just have it set up to work like a what's that called again? The haptic vest that people use in VR that has some level of support in some games. You could essentially set it up to be working like that. Plus, then in any game that is supported, you get your 6DoF tracking. So I think the haptic availability, and this is actually one of the most impressive capabilities. Seeing some other comments here. People are just saying that all of the demand for this is going to be in VR chat. I see some people bringing up Mocopi. Mindweaver saying Sony Mocopi 3D is cheaper and is not taken off either. So I think that's actually something we do want to bring up before we move on, because there are other solutions like Mocopi. Mocopi is not optical at all or electromagnetic. It's not actually 6DoF. Mocopi, these Sony trackers, these kind of small trackers, are IMU based. They are literally just what I was talking about, accelerometer and gyroscope with no optical or electromagnetic added on. Now, Pico trackers are the same thing when they're not in view of a camera, of the headset. They fall back to that. But Sony Mocopi is that all the time. And the issue with that is you can get a pretty decent estimate, because what they do is they feed all of these Mocopis that you're wearing into this kind of, going to say the word, skeletal body estimation system. I finally found the image. But it's never a true 6DoF pose. So when you're actually, trying to very precisely move your leg or move your arm and do a pose, it's not being truly reflected. Because of how this works, IMU only systems and Pico trackers, when they're not in view, they work best when you're in motion, right? If I'm doing a lot of motion, it can kind of work that out. But if I'm staying mostly still and being subtle, right? I'm just maybe sitting down and you're just hoping to get things like body language, or maybe I'm just standing up and kind of giving a presentation, and maybe I point to my foot, I raise my leg and point at it. These kind of things are not going to be captured very well in a Mocopi system. And that's why we're still in the era of people wanting Lighthouse and wanting FluxPose, because the pose that you get, this is what they mean by absolute positioning. It's truly 6DoF. The other thing is Mocopi and these other IMU systems require calibration, right? You have to T-pose, and then after time they'll drift and you have to recalibrate. With FluxPose, because this thing is known to be on your hip and then you have the headset mount, there's no calibration at all. Not between the play space. You don't need to do play space calibration like you do with Lighthouse. You don't need to do T-pose calibration. You put these things onto your body and you have body tracking instantaneously. Again, because it knows the trackers on your hip. By figuring out the distance between the headset and the emitter, you already have a tracking coordinate space there. So this is a complicated sort of system here. I understand that $500 is a lot of money. I get that this is only currently for VR chat. But if you are a PC VR chat user or Resonite, as I see some people coming along and saying, if you are one of those people, this to me seems like the perfect solution. I don't see why, if you were to buy a new headset, a Steam frame, it would be crazy to me to go and then buy base stations and HTC Vive trackers when this becomes available, assuming that this ships as a product that you can buy and not just a Kickstarter campaign.
Yeah, so I think someone in our comments echoed you of just saying, yeah, I'm going to be waiting until late next year to explore how this product lands before I throw my money at it. And that seems like a perfectly reasonable approach. We're going to talk about GravityXR now.
Yeah, let's talk about that because I think this is a really fascinating one. And hold on, let me just clear this image. Really gives you an insight into potentially what we might see from Meta next year. So GravityXR, this is a Chinese startup that consists of engineers who worked on the R1 chip at Apple, which is the coprocessor present in both of the Vision Pro models to date. They also have engineers who worked on hardware at Meta, Huawei, and Amazon, at Amazon's Echo hardware division. So within China, their investors include Gore-Tex, which is the Chinese company that manufactures your Quest headset. It also has ByteDance, the owner of TikTok and Pico, as an investor, and VC firms like Sequoia China and Lenovo Capital. So this is not, some, BS that one person's dreamed up. This is a very well-funded, well-backed company consisting of some of the best engineers in the industry. So they have built a chip. The headset that's on screen right now is a reference design that uses that chip. They are not making a headset, or at least they have no announced plans to make a headset. A reference design, if you're not familiar, it's when a company that makes a component that goes into a headset makes a example headset to show the world and the industry and potential partners, here's what you could build with our component. The component in question this company is building is a chip, specifically a coprocessor. And so today, in your Quest headset, you have this general purpose Snapdragon chipset that is doing everything from tracking to pass-through to rendering, and that includes hand tracking and position tracking, body tracking in some cases. All of these tasks, as well as your rendering, your computing, presenting the operating system, accessing the file system, all of that is done in one general purpose chipset. And so these chipsets, depending on your headset, will be somewhere between 10 and 20 watts. Okay. And that extra power usage corresponds with heat as well. So you're talking about 10 to 20 watts of heat to dissipate. And as I always point out on this podcast, the most important component of a standalone headset is its cooling fan that dissipates this heat away from the headset. So this brings us to this GX100 chip. It is designed to be a coprocessor that handles the latency sensitive tasks, only the tasks, well, let me rephrase that, the high bandwidth and latency sensitive tasks. So the tasks that need to be done by a chip that is right beside the sensors, because it would be a ridiculously hard engineering challenge and impractical on cost and all sorts of other things like cable thickness to send all of these high bandwidth sensors, the tracking cameras, the pass-through cameras, to send and process those across a cable. This does it on board the headset. And what that means is that you can offload the general purpose chipset to a tethered compute puck. The GX100 has a TDP of just 3 watts, which is, at least a third of a general purpose chipset, and in many cases can be a lot less. And that means that it can be passively cooled in many design cases, which eliminates the need for this cooling fan and the associated heavy heat sink that is actually a big overall contributor to the weight and bulk of our headsets today. So the chip itself, if you're interested in specs, it's on a 5 nanometer process node. It has a 10-core DSP. It achieved 200 top trillion operations per second for machine learning inference. And crucially, it has a memory bandwidth of 70 gigabytes per second, which means that it can handle many different cameras and sensors. The company claims it can handle up to 15 individually, and it can also output to dual 4K displays at 120 hertz. So the idea here is that this chip is put inside the headset it is directly beside the cameras. It's doing all of that high bandwidth processing from the cameras. It's doing the head tracking, the hand tracking, the pass through, all of these computer vision and image processing tasks. But it's doing that within a 3 watt budget so that you can keep the headset passively cooled. And thus you have this chip in a lightweight design. Then you offload the compute puck. You offload the main chip down to a compute puck where it's doing the rendering. But that compute puck doesn't have to do all of the image processing. It doesn't have to do the tracking. It doesn't have to take in cameras. So it can focus its memory bandwidth on the actual rendering, or it can just have a slightly lower TDP budget so that you can keep that passively cooled as well. And so the result here is that if you combine this with a open periphery design where you don't have any kind of facial interface on the side, and it's designed to kind of have a glasses-like design, and you really just strip out everything that isn't necessary to be there. Here's a much better view from the rear. You can achieve a pass-through headset that is less than 100 grams. This is their reference design. It's called GravityXR M1. They say it is a pass-through headset with pancake lenses behind 2.5K micro OLED displays, the same as Big Screen Beyond, 4 tracking cameras, and 2 pass-through cameras, yet weighs less than 100 grams. So again, I want to come back to this comment at the start where someone saw this image and said, oh, are these some new AI glasses? Do they even have a display? No. I want to be clear. This is not even see-through AR glasses or see-through bird bath. This is a pass-through mixed reality headset. And so just compared to X-Real, for example, because X-Real and VITUR, you get this field of view of around 50 to 60 degrees at most. And then you have this issue we always point out where to render opaque objects, you have to dim the view. This is a pass-through headset. Fundamentally, it's the same technology as your Quest or Vision Pro. So it can do, according to the company, this reference design has a 90-degree field of view, which is obviously much closer to your headset, and you can do whatever you want within it, right? Full control of each pixel. You can render fully opaque virtual objects while keeping the world fully bright, or any combination in between. Theoretically, again, this is just a reference design. You can also build in the ability to add in blinders to the side to be able to make this a VR headset. You could run a VR app on this and just have the open periphery, but that's not something that is the focus of this product. In the article, I said you could almost call this mixed reality glasses if you wanted to kind of use some sort of terminology like that. To be clear, I want to, again, just be crystal clear. This does not have a battery on board. It does not have the main chipset. It is a tethered design. It is tethered to a puck that has the compute. And that is how they're able to do this. And the relevance here, I don't think this chip is going to be used in the West because you're not going to see a Chinese design chip used in a Western headset for obvious political reasons. But this is the first time that when we're talking about this 2026 Meta headset, we can actually point to an image and say, here's the kind of thing it will roughly probably look like and the kind of approach that Meta is likely to take. This is how you square the circle of, wait, how are we going to go from a 500-gram Quest 3 to a 120-gram Puffin, or whatever you want to call it, Quest Air? How does that happen? This is an example of the engineering that pulls that off.
It's a little scampy talking about the naming here and asking why is it so similar to what other people are doing? I was going to ask this question. Is it likely that Meta makes its own chip, its own coprocessor for its headsets, or is it going to use this one?
That's a great question. So I don't think it'll use this one because, well, maybe I could be wrong. It would seem strange to me or difficult to understand in the current political climate and with all the things happening with decoupling, bringing manufacturing and design back to America and all of the tariffs and disincentives there, to see Meta use a Chinese design chip. But I think they will probably use something like it. They will either internally develop one, or I keep saying this is if it's going to happen in the future. If they're going to launch this product next year, they already have done so. Or, which I think is probably the most likely, Qualcomm does it. It's possible to me that the Qualcomm XR2 Gen 3 is not a single chip, but is a multi-chip solution. And we have seen that before from Qualcomm, right? The Qualcomm Snapdragon AR2 chip, which we haven't actually seen any product that I'm aware of that's actually shipped to consumers use, has this design that is dual chip. So I think again, this is all speculation. We're deep into speculation here. But if you look at the fact that there's so many reports now, and our sources as well, that say that Meta is going to launch this ultralight headset next year, it's hard to imagine how on earth you would send this kind of bandwidth across a cable. So it seems to me very likely that could happen. I think the Qualcomm partnership, I'd bet it's a multi-chip solution. XR2 Gen 3 is a multi-chip solution.
What was the display in the Quest Pro?
It was a sub 2K LCD with mini LED backlighting and quantum dots, so QLED as some people call it.
So not OLED, yeah. So I gotta just take my passing. You call this pass through, and we could put 3 different words on the other side of pass through. We could call it pass through virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality. And there we're at the heart of the terminology debate in this medium. I'm going to argue that the coprocessor chip inside these headsets is going to be the one responsible for a magic trick that confuses people about what these products actually are and what they do. Right now, when I start charging up the Apple Vision Pro from a dead battery, it maybe takes 5 minutes for it to be resuscitated from a full dead charge. But if it's not on a full dead charge, if it's there and just on and it needs to just wake up, it's probably 10 seconds to 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds even, for it to go from a black screen to showing me my pass-through view of the environment. I think when that time is 0, when you pick up the headset and it's already showing you your pass-through view, as like you've picked it up, you're putting on glasses, and it's showing you augmented reality the moment it's on your head, you start being able to call these mixed reality glasses, you start being able to call them augmented reality devices. But as long as the first thing you see is a black screen, you're passing photons through virtual reality on their way to your eyes. And I needed to take that moment to explain that this is the same fundamental path of photons to your eyes as an Apple Vision Pro, as a Quest, as everything else, not the other category of glasses that we always talk about.
I think you're hitting the nail on the head there in that a lot of people are going to look at this and the products that have a similar approach, like I'm going to just call it for shorthand Quest Air. We have no idea what it's going to be called. Like that kind of Quest Air, I think some people will look at it and assume that it is, a see-through AR waveguide or something. A lot of people would look at this image, and if we hadn't just described, they would say, "Oh, this is an X-Rail style thing, or it's a Magic Leap / HoloLens style thing." And you're right to point out that it is counterintuitive to actually kind of see this and go, "Wait a minute, this is a VR headset in many ways, right?" If you want to get into the way you would put it, it is a screen in front of pancake lenses. There's nothing optical see-through here. As you point out, if you didn't provide power to this, if you had this without being plugged in, you would see a black screen. You would see the magnified, turned off micro OLED display in your face. And so I think in terms of this trick of making people, it has disadvantages and advantages, right? In some ways, you have people who may maybe buy one of these products, say they come out like at the end of next year and say, "Oh, I didn't really like those VR headsets, but I have these, mixed reality glasses now, and this is such a better technology." And no, it's the same, as you point out, it's the exact same thing. It's just miniaturized and offloading the compute. But I think it's right to say that they do need to make these very, very appealing for, putting them on instantly and being in with zero friction. They do need to make sure that this coprocessor, even when the main chipset is stalled, can just present pass-through. That should be the fallback, and it probably will be. I would imagine that whenever the main chip is stalled, whenever it's just not working, whenever, say, hypothetically somehow provided power but not compute, they should just continue to present you with pass-through. That should be the fallback and the default. And at some point, I wonder, it depends on how good the pass-through is on the headset, but I think there will be some people that get this kind of visual Turing test because they don't assume it's even possible past already, where they just would assume, if you told them this is actually just a see-through headset, they would say, "Yeah, I'm just looking through some sort of lens, there's a bit of distortion, maybe it's just a lens I'm putting on the same way, I'm going to put on like safety goggles." I do think there are some people who will be tricked by these.
Oh yeah. Well, I think so. you edited it. You read what I was turning in on that day. When I tested out the Apple Vision Pro for the first time, and I was so impressed by the pass-through quality, and I had to carefully describe, no, it isn't see-through quality. Like it isn't the same as looking down at your own hands, but my brain can still accept it as such, right? Like I can still be tricked that I'm looking at my actual real hands here through one of these displays as they get better, better, and better. But I do wonder about OLED screens and the importance of needing OLED for that illusion over the span of time.
So I think when it comes to being with pass through, the thing that really affects the quality of the experience is the lighting. So I used Apple Vision Pro when we first got it outdoors, and there were times where in very bright lighting, for a moment, my mind would say, I am looking through a transparent optic, even with this 6 megapixel camera, 6.5 megapixel, because in bright light, there is no grain. Maybe you've only ever used your Quest 3 indoors. If you have a suitable environment, try it outdoors on a sunny day. Keep your lenses far away from the sun. Be careful about this. I'm just saying, find somewhere that is relatively sunny. We don't take responsibility for you breaking your Quest outdoors, but try it out and you'll see that the pass-through is actually a lot better than you might assume because it degrades so heavily in low light. So when it comes to OLED, I actually don't think it matters as much for mixed reality pass-through as it does for VR, because by the time you get down to the darkness levels that you start to get this really incredible contrast, the pass-through feed is going to be so grainy in the first place. Of course, and as well, the dynamic range and colors of these cameras typically aren't that great anyway. But there will be a point where we do get to the point where these pass-through cameras are good enough that does start to matter. But I think when it comes to the form factor, you want micro OLED here, arguably because it allows you to get the weight down. And there are some LCDs that are suitable, but not with good enough resolution. The thing about micro OLED is you get density, which means you get weight, low weight, and high resolution in the same package. And yeah, just to answer a question from our commenter here, just to be crystal clear, Nick Tater is asking, so is GravityXR more focused on the coprocessor or the headset? Did they just build their own headset to demo it and plan to sell the processor to other manufacturers? Your second question is right on the money. This is not a headset that they are ever going to sell you or even Chinese consumers. Their goal is they want people to buy the coprocessor, the chip. They want Chinese companies, presumably, but maybe also some other companies, to buy their chip and put it in their headset so that they can then use a MediaTek or a Qualcomm chip in a tethered compute puck. Now, will this run into the fact that my assumption here, which I could be wrong about, is that Qualcomm will just build this chip themselves? Maybe so. I did find that image in the background. This was from Qualcomm's AR2 chip solution. So a very different use case, but I'm just bringing it up as an example because it shows you that AR2 was presented as a solution. Ignore the phone here. There is the AR processor here and the AR coprocessor here. So Qualcomm does have a chipset solution. The AR2 is not a chip. It is a chipset solution. And they even have an image here, which is actually quite interesting for size comparison to kind of get an idea here, where this is the AR2. No one's used it that I'm fully aware of. Here's the chip and here's the coprocessor. So you get a kind of good idea of the kind of size comparison there.
So there's a feature you got me going here when you started showing the internet connectivity here. There's a feature I need on Apple Vision Pro. I need a virtual iPhone. And one of the ways it could be implemented is by turning the battery pack into a touchscreen that interacts one-to-one with what's happening on my iPhone. And the reason I'm sort of mentioning this is I've already got this feature on my Mac. The iPhone mirroring feature on my Mac has actually been blowing my mind in recent weeks or recent days even as I hooked it up. I'll get a notification on my Mac that I'll click on. And when I click on it, it opens my virtual iPhone here over on the left-hand side of the screen. And so sometimes I'll be working, and even though I've got like Slack open on both my Mac and on my iPhone, I'll get the Slack notification up here. I click on it. It opens my virtual iPhone over here on the left side of my Mac screen, and I'm reading a message from you over here on my virtual iPhone instead of on the big window I could have on my Mac screen. But you take that a few steps further, and there's a world where My iPhone is strapped on an iPhone sock to my body, and I'm still getting calls inside virtual reality and pulling up a virtual phone, even though I don't actually pull out the physical phone. And like, that's going to happen in the Apple ecosystem at some point. The question is, what do the competitors offer? And this processor aims to be a key part of that story, right? That the only thing I bring back is just, are the competitors really going to catch up? Like, because if Meta is the only player playing this game, no one's going to use this chip.
So I think if you have good enough pass-through and computer vision, you don't need iPhone mirroring because you just pick up your iPhone. If your pass-through is good enough, you can something we'll see.
That's interesting.
I think we strongly disagree on this, but I think it's more likely that Apple, they already have implemented like a very basic iPhone breakthrough, by the way, if you've noticed in the
Oh
latest
yeah,
versions
yeah.
of Vision OS. But I think it's more likely that in future this becomes sort of more advanced, where say your iPhone's sitting on the table and you get a call. Sure, of course, you always can mirror that through to Vision OS, or maybe a call is not a good example. You have some sort of notification there. They could just instantly segment out the iPhone. You pick it up. The pass-through is already good enough that you can use it, but as I'm sure you know yourself, by using Vision Pro, it's not ideal. You would rather have the headset off. I think once you get to good enough pass-through, you just use the phone in your hand.
No, my phone is in the other room, and I'm in my office, and I get a call on it, or a notification for work. Like it's the perfect example of so many of the problems I've been dealing with, where I've got two accounts for everything, and I divorce all of my activities across those two accounts to avoid the notifications routing to me in wrong ways. No, what happens is my phone, I forget where my phone is.
Right.
Right. Most of the time it's strapped to my body. Sometimes it's in my pocket. Sometimes it's in the room. But I've got an optically, like my iris is authenticated by this headset.
Yeah.
Why not just give me all of
Sure.
my phone right here in my hand?
So I think they probably will at some point, right? But I also think it's more likely that you say like your work notifications. There's a Slack app on Vision Pro. You use the iPad app. I think what Apple said at the start, I remember when the Vision Pro was first announced, they were asked by multiple journalists about this. And they said, can we bring our iPhone in? And they said, you're not going to, this is a heavy paraphrase to be clear. This is what they said in general. They basically said that you're not going to get your iPhone in there. You're going to get your iPhone apps in there. Your apps are there. So you get a notification from Slack. You don't, it's interesting that what you described is actually a bad experience. When you get a notification on your Mac, do you really want it to open in the little iPhone screen, or do you want to open in...
No, that
exactly.
sucked. That's why it's pissing me off here. I'm like, this is a step in the right direction and two steps in the wrong direction, right?
And I think that's my view here personally, that it is actually a step in the wrong direction, because we don't want a virtual iPhone. You want all of the apps from your iPhone. It's that what do you really want? You don't want the phone. You want the apps from it. And so I think over time...
Well, cellular connectivity, yeah.
Yes.
And the games. And you're right. One at a time. Yeah. I get what you're saying. All right, we ready to move on here? Any comments to respond to before we move on? That was a really good discussion. I do want to encourage you to hit the like button here as we move into the sort of the meatiest part of this discussion here as we get into these last few subjects.
Yeah. Look, to be clear, I think when I'm talking about like picking up your phone, I don't mean for a call. Obviously, a call should just be routed. I think I was more referring to, say, I don't know, you've ordered an Uber and you need to like navigate and you're used to using it on your fingers. Things like typing messages, where it's a lot easier to just use your phone keyboard than it is a virtual keyboard. There are times when you just want to pick up the phone. A phone call is probably the perfect example. To retract what I said, a phone call is actually a perfect example of where you do just want to come through the headset. But a text message, if you want to reply, if you have to send a paragraph to someone, do you want to sit and type it out in your Vision Pro, or do you want to just pull your phone and have, as soon as you touch your phone, it gets segmented into pass-through? Say you're in VR, you're in the middle of a virtual world, you pull your phone, you use it, your phone's there with you, you put it down, your phone goes away. That's kind of what I was pointing out, is the ideal flow for a lot of people. The calls are the example where you don't.
It's so silly. Like, so to have like right now, I'm only in Meta's ecosystem, right? I chose today to only immerse myself in Meta's ecosystem. So if my family wants to reach me, they have to knock on my door here physically in the real world. There's no digital avenue for them.
Well, do your family use Messenger or WhatsApp now?
Not for that kind of communication, right?
So
like
we're going to come back to our
there, but yeah,
we're going to come back to our US versus the rest of the world. If my family were to contact me, even like elderly members, they use WhatsApp, like
WhatsApp.
That's what. So
they were equivalent to you. No, what you're describing is Mark Zuckerberg buying FaceTime back in whenever he acquired WhatsApp. And he's just been waiting to integrate it into virtual reality for us. So, like, I get you, right? Like, there is an equivalent there on the other ecosystem. But whenever I try to use these one-to-one as one another, I face these situations where, like, yeah, you know what you're describing is there's no iMessage here, right?
Yeah.
There's no way for Apple. So yeah, bad on Apple for doing that. The only way for Apple to get me is if I'm wearing an AirPod or an Apple Watch and letting that interrupt me while I'm here with you. And no, that's a crappy experience. Apple, do better, right? But like, so there's that. But like, then there's all the other layers, right? I could pull up Mac remote desktop. I could pull up Meta remote desktop and get some of my stuff that way. And I could do those other ways of connecting to my other family, just as the reverse is going to be the case in some instances, like the watch or the Meta Band. If you're in an Apple Vision Pro, the flip should be the case, right? Where the Meta Band from WhatsApp should ring at you. And maybe they'll do the right where the Meta WhatsApp app should one-to-one, but it doesn't do that today, right? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's interesting actually because so this WhatsApp versus iMessage thing, it's so interesting how we always come back to this. And one of the things in the Meta Ray-Ban display review that I kind of noted was the irony that this is currently a US only product, but it's using the messenger system of the rest of the world. But that's aside. It's interesting that Meta recently brought, I don't know if you saw this, WhatsApp to Apple Watch. So there's a WhatsApp app on Apple Watch now, which makes me think surely we could see then maybe on Apple Vision Pro, or maybe that's
That's two-handed. That gets me two-handed input.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, if you were wearing your Vision Pro right now, and someone messaged you on WhatsApp and you had your Apple Watch on, you could just look down at the Apple Watch and see your message there, I guess.
But does the WhatsApp also get gyro data?
I don't think it does now. It doesn't.
Why can't I? I want to give it. I'm ready to give it my gyro data here on my right wrist, so that my gyro data on my left wrist so that Arlen and I can go play Deadpool and Wolverine with I can have my Wolverine arms with my Apple Watch on one wrist and my Meta Band on the other wrist.
I think that is a level.
Take my gyro data from my Apple Watch, Meta. You have my permission.
That is a level of interoperability between ecosystems that I think we can only dream about.
All right, yeah, I will dream of it, and I have asked for it. And darn, anyone who calls me, a stooge for one platform or the other, I would like to please point them to the previous segment of me complaining about both of these ecosystems and their interoperability. So, yeah, we're ready to talk about the SDK for smart glasses.
I was just going to say that's a good point. People who are locked into one ecosystem don't want interoperability, so that kind of is a good counter argument to anyone thinking that. The last person who would want interoperability would be that. In fact, you do see this sometimes when Apple fanboys, or fanboys of every company, but when Apple fanboys learn that a feature is now operable between other ecosystems, they actually get mad. They say, no, this should only be part of Apple. Thing to think, but that is a sentiment you see. So, and of course, it's not exclusive to Apple fanboyism. There are fanboys of all companies that have the same kind of perspective. Let's talk about Meta's Smart Glasses SDK. So they should really call it the Smart Glasses Camera SDK. It is the Wearables Device Access Toolkit is its technical name. What does this do? What is it? So it is out now in preview, which means developers can build with it into their smartphone apps, but they cannot ship it. So this is an SDK that does not run on the glasses technically. It runs on a smartphone app, and it lets smartphone apps access the camera of your Ray-Ban Meta or Oakley Meta glasses. They can already access the microphones and speakers, by the way. Already have been since launch, because Meta glasses are just Bluetooth devices to your phone. Meta does its own custom stuff on top of it, but underneath all of that, they're Bluetooth audio devices. If you open any app on your phone and play audio, the audio will play out of your glasses, right? They're just acting like Bluetooth speakers. If you go on a phone call in any app, they will pick up the microphone because, again, it's acting like a Bluetooth headset. So you could already theoretically build an app around just that, right? It wouldn't be specific to the glasses, but you could already open ChatGPT, for example, and start a live conversation, or Gemini Live. And with your glasses on, it's as if you've got Gemini and ChatGPT in your glasses, right? All it is Bluetooth audio. This toolkit, this SDK, is adding camera on top of that. So there is no kind of standardized way to pull off a kind of Bluetooth camera like this. And instead, Meta has built this SDK specifically for doing it. So it allows smartphone apps to request permission to use your glasses camera. So each app on your phone will have to have this kind of pop-up permission that is not your OS level permissions. It's a Meta glasses permissions, and it will then let them access the camera. They can then use that for two purposes, well, two technical purposes that they can build on top of: to capture images, which are high quality, or for a continuous video stream. The app in question can do whatever it wants with these images and video streams. You could just literally make a take photos app. That would be a very hello world app. Useless because you can already do that, but it would be a basic app. But with a video stream, you can do a lot more, of course. You can either save it, so you are making a video recording app as a hello world example, but more interestingly, of course, you can either live stream it or you can process it to do computer vision on it. And that's the case for the still photos as well for computer vision. So for an example, Twitch is currently working on adding a feature to the Twitch mobile app where when you have Ray-Ban Meta glasses connected, you'll be able to live stream from your Ray-Ban Meta glasses. So it will say, would you like to let the Twitch app access your glasses? You say yes, and now you can live stream directly to Twitch. That means that you're not just restricted to live streaming from Instagram, which is obviously the kind of default built-in live streaming. It also means that you can have multimodal conversations with AI. So if a company had an AI model and they added this toolkit to their smartphone app, they would be able to let you do the kind of live conversation you have with Meta AI, the Meta AI live mode, but with their own AI model. There are companies that could do a custom AI experience, like we saw Connect Disney testing it for having a park guide. You open the Disney app, you say, give access to my glasses, and now Disney's able to see what you see as you walk around the park. So live streaming and computer vision are kind of the two use cases for this, and you could do all kinds of other computer vision tasks. As we always say when these SDKs come out, it's never the stuff that we initially assume that is the most interesting stuff. It's the things that developers come up with. So right now they can go and download it and start it, but again, they cannot ship it yet. This is a preview release of the toolkit.
I'm lost in thoughts reading all of our comments as our readers sort of imagine their dream scenarios of the content that they enjoy on their flat screen streaming into their VR headset of choice. And I just want to say that my heart goes out to our commenters who have that vision of the exact content that they want on that flat screen right there available to them on their headset of choice, in addition to the world of choice they want to be inside while enjoying their flat screen content, right? That is the dream of VR here, and we're slowly like chipping away at it year after year, but no one wants to let any one company have ownership of everything, so it makes it so hard for us to enjoy VR, that dream way that you're talking about in our comments. I just wanted to say that, and also encourage you to hit the like button, because right after we talk about the Glasses SDK, we're going to have two pretty meaty discussions here about the future of VR.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more to say about this. We'll have to see what developers build with it. It works with iOS and Android. I will be interested to see how long it takes Twitch. Twitch has confirmed that it is shipping that feature. We'll have to see when it ends up shipping. They'll need to wait for the public release of the SDK, I guess. There's some other companies like Logitech Streamlabs. If you use that, they're kind of building it there. So yeah, we'll see what people build on this. I guess this came out earlier today, so there are going to be people right now that are hacking around with this with their Android or iOS phone and their Meta glasses and seeing what they can build. So I'm very curious to see what people do. The gesture-driven controls is an interesting one to see. What are people going to do with more advanced computer vision on the actual video stream? I think you could do some interesting stuff there with the massive limitation that you can't show anything to the user.
Yep. We'll be curious to see what comes out of there. I think it's time to talk about the job cuts here. I think pretty soon. Pretty wild to have it come out this early, that they're considering these cuts. But it also comes hand in hand with the last bit of news that we've got here, which is going to kind of add context to that. So I think we'll probably end up talking about these fluidly pretty quickly here, but why don't you break down what we know?
No, you're right. These are very related in some ways. We have one story here where, according to Bloomberg, Meta Reality Labs, the division of Meta that's behind Quest headsets, Horizon OS, Horizon Worlds, Hyperscape, smart glasses, basically the everything but the family of apps at Meta is Reality Labs. Everything but family of apps and AI fundamental models is Reality Labs. It's the hardware, it's the metaverse stuff, the XR, the smart glasses, as well as research and development into like codec avatars and advanced reconstruction and true AR glasses, which is yet to launch, of course. That's Reality Labs, and according to Bloomberg, they're facing up to 30% budget cut over the next kind of year or so. And so there's some context here that's obviously very important to add. You can very much so see this and start spinning off sort of doomer takes on this without the context. I think is important. One is that Reality Labs, since it's been breaking out its financials from Q4 2020, that's the first quarter they broke it out separately, has consistently been spending a lot more than it makes. And so every quarter you get these headlines of Reality Labs makes billion, $4 billion loss in quarter, because it's a great headline. I'm sure it gets them lots of clicks every quarter. Why wouldn't you write it? And it's technically correct in an accounting financial sense to say that every single quarter Reality Labs has made a loss. In reality, it's probably more accurate to describe a lot of this spending as long-term investment. Around 2022, it was publicly reported that more than half of this spending was on the research and development of AR glasses. So that's more than half, again, of this research and development of AR glasses. AR glasses have not even launched yet. We have smart glasses and we have HUD glasses, but in terms of true AR glasses that you can actually have, an app ecosystem on, you can bring up a YouTube window and pin it. All of these things that today are in the realm of mixed reality doesn't even exist yet as a product. Quest headsets are obviously very early. We're talking about them still being 500-gram face bricks, whereas this kind of Quest Air future, we're talking about getting like a fifth of that weight. We're still very early. We don't even have eye tracking Quest headsets. They still use LCD displays. We don't have codec avatars. All of this needs to be taken into account. But at some point, Meta is not a charity. It is a business, and it does want Reality Labs to be a profitable division. And so part of that involves increasing revenue, and another part of that involves increasing costs. And at some point, gradually or suddenly or however, this division has to transform from a bloated R&D lab into a viable business. And there's no way, looking at these numbers, that you get to that without some sort of cuts. The other context I want to add is that, according to even Bloomberg in their own report, Meta typically in these budget cycles tries to get each of its divisions to cut spending, general spending, by about 10% when they're trying to do a spending cut. And so this 30% is higher than usual, but it's not out of the blue. They say that it's most focused on VR and Horizon Worlds, and smart glasses ambitions are actually going to be scaled up. The other context I want to add is that we saw something very similar from The Information about a year and a half ago. They reported that Reality Labs was told to cut spending by 20% by 2026. So this was a year and a half ago. In reality, in 2025, they spent pretty much the same as 2024 with no change. So there have been reports in the past of, Meta must cut Reality Labs spending next year. You have to understand the context of this, as I always say, the context of when something was said. This was in a meeting where they're trying to set a budget and trying to reduce costs. So all of that said, this obviously does come at the time when smart glasses sales are skyrocketing. They're still selling as many of these models as fast as they can make them. Meanwhile, Quest headset sales for the first 3 quarters of this year have been down year over year. It does make sense to have some adjustment in investment. I don't think when we look at this graph next year, it's going to look that much different. And I don't think even if they aim for 30%, they're actually going to get to 30%. So I think a lot of the report is just hysteria. At some point, you have to reduce costs. It's something we've seen over and over in the past. Look at this graph. Look at how these costs have ballooned even over the past 3 years.
Do I have a track record on this podcast with you of saying that there was a potential of them shutting down Horizon Worlds?
I think you've said it many times.
And I suggested it could happen pretty recently, right? Like that, and you were like, "It's not going to happen."
Well, I mean, to be clear, you said it was going to happen right after they announced Horizon Engine, which to me seems it would be a very bizarre time to shut things down after you literally switch from Unity to your own custom engine that you've spent years building.
And I wouldn't want them to shut down Horizon Worlds, right? There's plenty of memories that have been made there with beautiful places that have been made that would be tragedy to see them go away. But to your last sort of comments there about not expecting the charts to be any different next year, that's what's sort of breaking my brain here. Is we've seen them announce cut after cut after cut, but Meta and the leadership there seem to have a problem with not hiring to fill the gap of the layoffs they just did. So every time they announce layoffs, they are still hiring an extraordinary amount of people at an extraordinary rate for some division inside their ecosystem. And so it always makes these numbers go wonky, where it's like, didn't they just lay off like 2,000 people? Oh yeah, but just hired another 1,000, right? Like crazy the way this math works.
It is crazy. And I think a lot of this does come down to investor sentiment. A lot of this, again, I always try to say, what's the context of this? So firstly, this is a budget meeting. A lot of this is to be able to say in the next, earnings call, we've made efficiencies and scaled down our spending, even when it might be, 20% or something like that in the end. And then, you get the press obviously going with Meta slashes Reality Labs budget, VR has failed. And then that's actually good for Meta. I don't know if you saw this, but earlier today, their stock price went up when this news came out. So, a lot of it is just about investor sentiment. There is this thing on Wall Street and in these companies where they have to be seen to being lean and efficient and cutting all of the costs. And a lot of it, again, look at this chart. We've heard so many times, Reality Labs, we're going to, either, increase costs, but we're going to keep things efficient. There was the year of efficiency. Where's the year of efficiency on this chart? Can you point to the year of efficiency here? You could say 2023, but, it still went up and then up even further. I don't know. I think a lot of this is just that. But at some point, I agree with you. It actually is shocking to me that they haven't reduced this. It's at some point, this thing has to try to become profitable. But this comes back to talking about what we talk about every week on this podcast, the time frame we're talking about. The investors, the people on these earnings call the Wall Street analysts, they are thinking about quarters. And, like love him or hate him, Mark Zuckerberg, for all of his flaws, when it comes to this technology, is thinking about decades. And when you look at this, when you zoom this out to decades, it's in Zuckerberg's mind, if all goes well, it's not going to matter what it looked like in the first half of 2020s. It's going to matter what it looks like in the 2040s. He is, for a CEO of a company this large, very young and has decades left unless something happens to him to be able to build this vision out. And all he has to do is ride the technology advances that are already, everywhere, right? LLMs in terms of the software side, Gaussian splatting. We can already see these massive technology waves coming in that are kind of accelerating things over time, even when the hardware progression has maybe not gone as fast as possible.
So F. Meister saying, I don't understand how they've been able to afford it for so long. Well, there are people who click on those ads on Facebook. They're not you. And I would think very hard about who those people are that are clicking on those ads and how often they're clicking on those ads and what it means to be a person who always clicks on Facebook ads.
Look, I was just going to say, how can they afford it? Let's just be very clear. This is Meta Reality Labs, which is like 3% of Meta financially, maybe 2% depending on the year. Meta is one of the most profitable companies on the planet. It's overall Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp business. They're making like 60 billion in profit a year. 60 billion. Like this is chump change, it's not chump change. That's obviously a ridiculous thing, but I'm saying they are able to afford this because the rest of their business is ridiculously profitable. And many companies have these R&D budgets, by the way. They don't get scrutinized like Meta. Apple spends tens of billions of dollars on R&D. There are lots of big companies like Microsoft as well spends a lot of money on R&D, but none of them ever say what it's for. Meta is one of the only big tech companies that does show you what they're actually working on inside the lab. You'll never see the things that Apple is working on until Mark Gurman reports them. You'll never see the things that Microsoft's working on or Amazon is working on deep in the lab. Google is a bit more open, to be fair, but nobody is as open as Meta in terms of what they're actually working on and showing the world. We never see early stage R&D like Meta shows.
That's interesting. I have to think about that, right? Because there's so many pieces of it, right? There was one in particular that I remember I've asked a couple people about, but I remember the iPad got leaked as being less than $1,000, and there was a whole news cycle where everyone was kind of making fun of Apple for making such an expensive tablet. And, a $999 tablet, that's ridiculous. That's so expensive. Nobody wants to spend $1,000 on a tablet that's a dead-on-arrival Apple product. I believe that was the discussion back when that happened. And then Apple came out a few months later and said, our starting price is $499, and we're starting iPad there. And suddenly there was an entire product category that existed despite, that's a huge segment of Apple's revenue. There's a whole bunch of copycat tablets that follow the same model as the iPad, and I'm convinced that if you go back into history, that head fake of convincing people it's going to be $1,000, and then actually having that at $500 created a huge market where there wouldn't have been none on a different price scale, and so. I hate suggesting that these companies don't leak selective things at certain times, and even if they're open.
I really look. I think we're going to have to disagree on this, but I don't think they do. I learned. Do you remember at Valve, we asked them about this? I was pretty frank with them, and I guess it's possible that these people are all expert liars. I don't think it was. There was no indication of any deception when they kind of looked at us with the answer that no, it's just somebody pushed the wrong or put the wrong file. We actually don't do any of these leaks. They said that directly to me, and I was kind of shocked because I do none of it. You don't even tease anything. You don't put things out there and hope people find them. And nope, we really do not. And yeah, I think the Apple thing, by the way, was interesting because a lot of people thought that for the Vision Pro. There were these rumors of $3,000. That was the rumor. It was $3,500. It went the other way. And I remember you as well and other people were saying, I think this might be the iPad thing again. We might be seeing a $1,500 headset, and it came out and it's $3,500. So I thought that was an interesting. It happens ways, right? Why wouldn't have Apple leaked, $6,000? It's never attribute to some grand scheme what can be explained by somebody putting the wrong date on a public document or something.
I mean, you're talking to the person who interviewed the guy who found a Quest Pro in a hallway, right? And so I'm interviewing him, and he is being disbelieved by the entire internet as to having found it under these ridiculous circumstances. And there's plenty of people out there, truthers out on the internet who are looking at him going, this is a Meta employee working at this hotel who is clearly building some kind of hype for a device that everyone forgot, right? That was a clunker of a device.
And yeah, I am very confident that Meta did not put this in a hotel hoping that some person would find it. It's, fortunately, in reality, I'm going to get flack for this, but most conspiracy theories are just human beings are not as coordinated and capable of these grand schemes that people think they are.
I love it, David. I love that at the same time that we're talking about the most important technology of the 21st century.
Yes, but marketing PR people are not running these clandestine stuff. They normally, when they try it, they get caught out very quickly. It's very hard to do something like that and not get it found out. And you know what? The other thing is control. They don't want this, what the leak is going to be. They want to be the first to present it. They hate when things leak. They really pisses them off. They want to be the ones to say it on stage. They want you to be surprised when they pull out the product. The only product that I've actually been surprised before going to see in this industry for the past 10 years now, maybe 5 years to be more realistic, was Steam Frame. I didn't know what I was going to see, right? With every other thing, I knew what they're going to say before they got on stage, and everyone does. I'm not saying I have insider knowledge. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman tells you a week before.
You're missing what I'm going. Mark Zuckerberg did a podcast with what's his name as a codec avatar.
Oh, Lex Friedman.
Yeah, so he did a podcast with Lex Friedman as a codec avatar, Did they, during the 3-hour podcast, discuss the scanning process?
I can't recall. I think they did, but they didn't say that it was running on whether it was running on a PC. I don't think they said the rendering, but they did talk about the scanning. I think they did say that part.
So I'm going. This is so off topic, but we have deep connections to a lot of people in the industry at a lot of different layers. And we invite them to speak on our shows. We invite them to where we got a showcase coming where we've invited everyone out there to give their best shot at, like, show us what VR games you've got out there in development. And it's so hard to, like, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I need to look at the comments here, and we'll come back to it in a minute.
I just love that there is Biggs in the comment is absolutely refusing to accept that that these things are not leaked. He's saying, "Come on, guys, planned leaks are marketing. Doesn't mean all leaks are marketing, but let's be intellectually honest here." I'm sorry, you're wrong. They really aren't. These things just happen. Somebody
HTC is not the same. HTC,
yes,
they leak on purpose.
That do things like this, but these giant companies, they would get found out so easily that they would rather. You have to understand from these people's perspective. If it gets found out that they did this, and then their name is in the press, they don't want that attention. They would not want a big press cycle about how they tried to fake this. There are Chinese companies that do it, of course, but I promise you, Apple did not leave that iPhone in a bar on purpose. Meta did not leave the Quest Pro in a hotel. They didn't. This guy, do you get the impression that this hotel worker was lying to you this entire time with some paid informant of Meta? Do you really think that they could have pulled that off? And why? So that we could see the Quest Pro a month before it gets revealed in some low resolution shitty Facebook video? For what?
So where I was going with that when I lost my train of thought is, when you're a high level press outlet, you have on the background, on the record and off the record sources that you're communicating with. And if they've got a media professional on the other end of the conversation, or an executive who has been trained in media dealings, right? They could say, "I will come on your show and talk to you, but I only want to talk about this." And you as a media professional can say, "No, I don't want that to be a limit on our conversation. I want to talk to you about everything," right? And so, like, that's that little conversation I just said plays out across every media conversation in different ways, shapes, and forms. And so, like, if someone goes and breaks something, they just agreed not to discuss a couple parts of the thing with the executive in order for the executive to confirm that the thing they got from person C over here was actually there. So, like, for example, Meta rebranded itself as Meta, right? It was very clear that it was going to be Facebook to Meta. The Verge had a great interview with Mark Zuckerberg. Not a great interview. They had a lengthy interview with Mark Zuckerberg the day that Meta announced its big rebranding. But they didn't pre-report that Facebook is going to become Meta. They weren't a site to that. If I had to guess, there was a reporter there at The Verge that knew it was going to become Meta and then negotiated themselves to an interview with Mark Zuckerberg. That's how a lot of these things get played. And that is manipulation. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah, of course.
So, like, you got to also say that manipulation is happening all the time at the same time that a lot of these things aren't leaks.
Yes, I agree with you. That's the ultimate reality of the world in many ways. There are these outlandish conspiracy theories in many realms that rely on thousands of people coordinating a lie over decades that are just ridiculous. But at the same time, there are actual manipulations that go on in public, and you can actually just, if you look at it, notice it, and it's publicly available knowledge. You know, like what you're just saying is not hidden. This is things you can go and find details about this. It's publicly talked about. It's in, you know, some of the like disclosures of certain journalistic outlets. They will tell you that it happened. They will say, you know, we do this from time to time. That's the kind of coordination that really goes on. And I think a lot of this also, when it comes to like conspiracy theories in general, when it becomes this nebulous idea of Meta as this like far off, you know, boardroom of shady people you don't know, you know, it becomes like, oh, sure, they could have done it. But then, you know, you meet the PR people at this company and you're like, no, this isn't happening. Like, they're not pulling off a giant scheme. It's not happening. It's the same thing with the government, right? A lot of conspiracy theories are the government did this. And then you realize, what is the government? It's a bunch of different organizations, each with their own interests and wants, and people who have their own lives and go home to their families at the end of the day. And all of these people are individual agents. There is no kind of
But
one hive mind government that's doing the seeding the clouds or whatever. It's like
but
it's all people, and
I've been watching.
they leak things. Here's the irony: if a company did this, right, like Meta, the leak would leak. That's the thing. If they pulled off putting a Quest Pro in a hotel room for whatever fucking reason, you would get it leaked. The scheme would be leaked, and the document describing the scheme would be leaked before the leak even came out in the first place. You would see it in The Verge, or Bloomberg's Mark Gurman would talk about inside Meta's leak. Meta can't even stop their own headset plans and model plans and news release plans leaking. You think they could stop their evil scheme to put headsets in hotels from leaking? They'd be all over the place. Someone would sell it to the press. Some Meta employee would go and make $100,000 by selling it to the New York Times, and they would put it
I'm
in the front page.
I'm remembering. All right. So I gotta talk about our comments here. People are talking about Pluribus. Go watch Pluribus on Apple TV. It's a fantastic science fiction show. Yeah, that's my pitch for that. And then I'm remembering a scene in The Social Network where the two Edward is arguing about planting a chicken story in the Stanford newspaper. They're fighting that over the founding of Facebook. I'm I appreciated so much of your context, and I'm loving the commenters there. At the same time, we will see like a theatrical. Someone's going to make a sequel to The Social Network. I think it's already in production, and I want there to be a scene where Zuckerberg zaps an animal to death with a little gun, with his little zapper gun that we heard the head of Twitter talk about. Right, that Zuckerberg he wants to, as I recall the reporting, he wants to eat everything. He wants to kill everything he eats. All right, so he zaps the little goat with a gun, and then he says, "Ship the Oculus Quest." That's what I want to see in the movie. Okay.
I hope you get that. I really do. Just before we move off this, I see the argument for this clandestine marketing is, well, they're testing the waters. They see what do people think of the leak. The funny thing that I've learned in this job is that most people ignore leaks, believe it or not. Because every time, even when there's a headset or technology that has leaked every day for the past month before it comes out, and all of us in the know at UploadVR and all of our readers and viewers know everything about this, the day that the headset is officially announced, we get the biggest wave of traffic and people and new commenters going, "Hey, what is this? What have they just announced? I don't understand. Like, I haven't heard anything about this." So leaks are only actually even viewed by this like tech enthusiast people. Most people out there don't actually know that the new iPhone was going to be the iPhone Air, even though we all knew it for months because we read Bloomberg's market.
No,
that Apple is probably to get to this level, but most people. And I asked them, are you going to get the new iPhone this year? When everyone knew it was the Air in our industry. Oh no, what is it? What are they doing this year? Are they coming out? Some people even say, are they coming out with a new iPhone this year? People don't even know that. Like the idea that you're going to get a test, a representative sample from the larger consumer market based on only the people who read about leaks on tech news websites, that's a flawed idea. But let's get off because we could rant all day about it.
I mean, I'm just gonna. I talk about shocking a goat. That the only context I want to throw back at you on the whole clandestine thing is billionaires are not like you. The people who are in charge of these organizations, the way they make their decisions are not as ethical and as straightforward as you would make them out to be in this.
I'm not suggesting they're ethical. I'm saying it's in their own self-interest to not get caught. I'm saying the disadvantage of being caught would be more than the advantage. And remember, these billionaires, you can read so many of their emails because every time that there's the court deposition and you have to take out all of these emails, there's an entire website where you can go and read thousands and thousands of emails from these executives to each other. I've read them. I love to read Steve Jobs' emails. They're really interesting. I've learned so much about Steve Jobs' internal thinking because you have these emails that he never thought would be public, where he's sending them off and saying to people, there's the very famous one where he talks about Adobe hiring Apple staff, and he emails the Adobe CEO and said, "I thought we had a policy where we wouldn't hire from each other. Let me know if that's changed. And if it hasn't, I'm going to start hiring from Adobe tomorrow," and it's obviously a veiled threat. There's some brilliant ones from Jobs, from Zuckerberg, from Gates, all of these people. And I'm just saying, none of these emails has there ever been put the Quest Pro in someone's hotel, or put the iPhone on this bar. These companies have done so many clandestine real things because they would have a greater advantage to do them, because they would help them, get through some investment or get through some merger through, or avoid some regulatory issue. There are actual real conspiracies out there without having to invent ones, is all I'm saying.
Mm.
I'm not saying they're ethical. As I want to point out, they're not ethical. Well, it depends on the individual, of course.
What I hate it. You're right. So much of what you said was just don't believe every conspiracy theory you hear. That was the takeaway from a lot of what you said, right? But at the same time, I need to contextualize that with these companies are in fact dealing with the data that manages our lives, and their choices affect our lives in deeply dramatic ways. And the settings in which they make these decisions are about as close to Bond villain-esque as you possibly could get in some situations. Like, that's how much money they have, is they could put a house in a volcano if they wanted. And like, to not, we have to balance both these things out, that they're dealing with the data that manages our lives,
sure,
making these decisions for us.
In many ways, I'm not questioning it depends on the individual, their ethics or evilness. I'm questioning their competence, not them as individuals, but in many cases, yes, but as an organization.
I got it. Okay. There's a quote.
Just let me just finish this sentence. The imagined competence of conspiracy theories. I would love to live in a world where people were that competent. We do not live in that world.
Yes. So when I interrupted David, Watergate, right? In the famous reporting about Watergate, I believe Deep Throat is quoted as saying, these are not very smart people, and things just got out of hand.
Yeah, there are very, very few people on Earth who are capable of pulling off these kind of schemes and not eventually getting caught, and they don't work for the PR department of a tech company. That's not anything against PR people. I'm just saying, they don't work for, intelligence agencies and quant firms and things like that.
Now that's, let me throw this out there. Like, if you were to close down Horizon Worlds but still make VR headsets at Meta, UploadVR might be a good outlet to tell. You might want to tell UploadVR that, so that we could definitively report that you're shutting down a certain aspect of the effort while still getting another effort of the going. But I don't want the moon landing being questioned as it is currently in our comments, David.
I'm very strong about that. I don't know if you have this over in the US, but there's a sketch show called Mitchell and Webb in the UK where they have a brilliant episode on the moon landing. They have this sketch where it's people in an evil boardroom coming up with how they're going to pull off a conspiracy theory. And so for the moon landing, they say, well, what's step one? What are we going to need? Oh, well, we're going to need to make a massive rocket capable of going to the moon, because obviously hundreds of thousands of people are going to come and watch it, as they did for the Apollo program. So we're going to need to make a massive rocket big enough to go to the moon and send it into space. Watch it with binoculars and TV cameras as they walk on. And then, from there, what do we do? Well, I guess we could try and, then pre-record it, but actually might be cheaper if, given we're not in space, we just went to the moon.
Yeah, right. That's exactly. VR is not real. It's just a conspiracy theory that people happen to have when you put it on your face. It's so funny to think. We go through this in our community of, like, if you had gone back 20 years and said, "Yeah, VR is going to happen," you'd go, "No, this isn't really going to happen." But really, that's so much of what we fight, is the realization that, computers are actually going on our faces.
And it's so much of the opposition.
What?
Oh, sorry. I was just saying, it's also so much of the opposition. It's so much of the opposite. There is a lot of people are fundamentally, viscerally opposed to that mere idea until it becomes enough utility for them.
We've got our last topic here, but I love Spatial Biggs teasing you here in the comments
about the moon landing.
That Heaney just hasn't done his research here. I love it. All right. Are we ready to talk about Apple's head of UI? Because I think that's the flip side of the 30% thing, is that Meta is making a big move here.
Absolutely. So if you were to look at that past story, and obviously, again, we're contextualizing it, it's a bloated organization. It should cut costs. I think no one would disagree with that. So to me, it's not surprising. It doesn't spell the doom that some of the headlines have kind of pulled out of this, that VR is dead because the company that VR division has this graph, it needs to cut some of the spending. It doesn't say that VR is dead to me at all. But here's another kind of balancing to this, which is if you are someone who believes, oh, Meta is going to shut up shop anytime soon on this Reality Labs stuff, like some of the investors seem to think, we have Apple's head of software design leaving to join Meta to lead design at a new design studio that Meta is making. So this is Alan Dye. He joined Apple in 2006, and since 2015 has been the VP in charge of the company's software design. So UI design, the operating systems, the apps, all of the UI of Apple. Basically, there is a head of software design and a head of hardware design. And this guy was the head of software design until, I guess, the last few days, where he has announced that he is leaving. He is moving to Meta. At Apple, he was involved in iOS 7 and watchOS under his predecessor as the leader. He was working on the iPhone 10 swipe system. You don't even think of these things as software, but they are, right? It's software interacting with hardware. AirPods pairing interface, CarPlay, Dynamic Island, Vision OS, all of the modern designs of the App Store, Safari, Maps, TV, Notes, FaceTime. Don't know how to make this more clear. This guy was the head of software design and interface design at Apple. All of it, including the design language, from 2015 until now. So what will he be doing at Meta? Well, Mark Zuckerberg has announced that he will be leading a kind of new top-level group within Reality Labs that will just be focused on design, hardware and software, it sounds like, from the Mark Zuckerberg statement. Let me just read out Zuckerberg's statement to make this simpler. Zuckerberg says, "The new studio will bring together design, fashion, and technology to define the next generation of our products and experiences. Our idea is to treat intelligence as a new design material and imagine what becomes possible when abundant, capable, and human-centered." Here's the interesting part. "We plan to elevate design within Meta and pull together a talented group with a combination of craft, creative vision, systems thinking, and deep experience in building iconic products that bridge hardware and software." So with this new studio, we're focused on making every blah, blah, blah. The rest of it's kind of irrelevant. I think the really interesting part of Zuckerberg's statement that really matters is this idea that design is going to be prioritized at Meta. They are hiring some of the top design talent in the world, as well as this guy, Alan Dye. They also have brought over one of his deputies, who was one of his deputies at Apple since 2016, so for the past 9 years. They are giving them kind of this ability to have full control over the design. They're elevating design as not a second thought after, move fast and build something, build a prototype, and then worry about design later. They are realizing that, let's get to the elephant in the room here. Design has been a catastrophe at Meta Reality Labs since, for a long time. It has been a mess. The headsets have been all over the place. There's no consistent design language. I have said this before, but Quest 3 is ugly. Quest 3S is a little bit less ugly, but still ugly. Quest 3 is uniquely ugly because it has this kind of triclops design, which human beings did not evolve to like. We like things with 2 eyes. We don't like things with 3 eyes. That's weird. It looks ugly. I don't think this guy would have ever shipped Quest 3 looking like that. And it does matter. Maybe you don't care because you don't see the front of it, but it matters when it comes to getting people to buy a product, right? People want to buy something that does have this kind of sleek and nice look to it on a mass market. Quest headset sales are down year over year. I think this is probably one of my most idiosyncratic views, but I actually do think that the ugliness of Quest 3 has an effect on its sales, and it is a product that is constrained by not being aesthetic. So that's an example of why design is bad on the hardware side. On the software side, we all know, if you use a Quest headset, it's been a catastrophe. It has been a clusterfuck, to swear. I think it's appropriate to swear in the case of design.
Everyone, I want to see a little spike in our readership right at that moment, because it's exactly like, if you're going to use that word at that time, that's the sentence to use it in. All right.
I think so, yes. So we have seen some positive moves from my view in the past year, right? We do have this ongoing Navigator overhaul of Horizon OS. I think it's getting better, but it's still very incomplete. It still needs a rethink. It still needs someone with a design eye. Now, one of the things I find really interesting about this guy's move, Alan Dye, is that the reaction of some of the Apple fan base. there has been, as I always point out, Apple detests Meta. Again, I speak about how I like to use this website that lets you read all of these emails and these court depositions between CEOs and between executives at Apple. They absolutely hate Meta with their guts. So the reaction in Apple news circles and in Apple fan circles is kind of, I would say, copium. People are saying, "Oh, well, this guy was useless anyway. Everyone hated him. He was a terrible designer." I'm glad that he's left to Meta, which maybe that's true, because you might say, the liquid glass was obviously his last big project and it hasn't really been received very well. But you can't just throw out the fact that this guy's been leading the entire company's software design since 2015. So maybe that is your view, that every piece of software design from Apple since 2015 has been bad. That might be your view, but I don't think it actually is too many people's view. I think there's some cope going on here. I think there is a definite degree of copium. This is not the first Apple talent that has moved to Meta in recent years. Zuckerberg has been across the industry, across the tech industry, especially in AI, putting out $100 million, $1 billion offers to people. I would love to know how much this guy was paid to move over. I think the reality here is that Zuckerberg is realizing, and perhaps already realized, that if you actually want to compete with Apple and Google and not just be the BlackBerry that gets steamrolled when Apple and Google get serious, you need to be deadly serious. Design needs to be everything. Design is why Apple is the most valuable tech company, consumer tech company in the world. Design is why Apple is Apple. Google has just about got serious about it in the past 5 years. As someone who's been using, Android for a long time, it was terrible for the first half of the 2010s. It got a little bit better, and now in the 2020s, it's together. But it would have been a very different market had they been serious about design from the start. So this is the kind of the medicine Meta needs, is to bring in some world-class designers, elevate design up to the top of the company. Let's see what they pull off. It'll take years for this to trickle into products. Let's see what Meta's interfaces look like in 2 years from now.
That the idea that it takes years to trickle into products is really fascinating, and I like that I watched your body language when you were reading the flowery language of a design material. Intelligence is a design material. Okay, come on, show us what that means. Come on. You want us to be wearing your devices. Thank you, Mark. We got your message. All right. So what is the actual products that they put that this guy's in charge of? They are working with Palmer Luckey in some of the military efforts. I saw someone in our comments saying this really turned my mind around on whether Meta could actually succeed here after so many problems. I'm remembering the specific instance where I got to meet Mark Zuckerberg face to face and talk to him and Andrew Bosworth at an event 3 years ago now, or 2 or 3 years ago now, when they announced the Quest Pro. And he took personal responsibility for making the choice of shipping it open periphery. And, well, we're just going to ship it just like this, is what his decision was at that time. And then we had that shipping product, which had a full VR sleeve ship 3 weeks or something after the product actually went out. It was clearly, when he made that choice, a whole bunch of people scattered and made clearly made decisions for the product around Mark Zuckerberg's edict. But you just described something very different, right? You described a person living with a product and really understanding it in and out. I would love to hear I would love to understand how many times Mark Zuckerberg checks in with these products along with their development cycles, and how much he really thinks before he makes a decision like that.
Yeah, look, I think it's clear that Mark Zuckerberg is not a world-class designer. He will obviously have learned a lot from designers being the CEO of a company for that long. Andrew Bosworth will as well. But at the end of the day, taste, when it comes to aesthetic taste, is something some people have and some people don't. And some people have it in being able to discern it, and other people have it in being able to actually create it from scratch. And I don't, to be clear, I'm not one of these people. I'm not trying to say I am. I'm saying that there are people that exist like this, and they do in these companies. They do exist, and you have to give them the freedom to not be able to be overruled by a CEO who comes and says, actually, I don't like this. And so there is a tension there. Sometimes the ideal is that you get a founder CEO who is also a designer and has a design taste and a creative taste there. And that's Steve Jobs, for example. It's someone who is able to work with designers hands-on directly. Other times, I think you're just going to have to say, look, I'm hiring you because you're the right person for the job. I'm going to trust you and say that you're going to be able to execute a vision. And I think that's probably what Zuckerberg is hinting at here with this design studio and saying, as you just described, Mark Zuckerberg making a design decision on that specific one. Good idea, far too early, right? The pass-through just wasn't good enough. The headset was too heavy. It was all of the apps were VR. There was no real mixed reality capability there to speak about. So it doesn't make sense to prioritize open periphery before you actually get to really good pass-through and mixed reality. But it's the right instinct, but too early. And I think some of that matters. It's all, he talks here about the Apple idea of building hardware with software that works with software that works with hardware designed together. And some of that is designing around the limitations of where the technology is today. You don't design a product based on where the technology will be in 5 or 10 years when it's a hardware and software product that the user is buying today. It needs to be built around the constraints of today. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to see. It is frustrating that it's going to take probably at the very minimum a year to see anything out of this, if not multiple years. But I really wonder what it looks like at the end of this decade. I said, I think on like New Year's Eve 2019, that Meta will enter this decade as a consumer apps company and exit it as a hardware and platforms company. If they're going to do that, they're going to need this. I really wonder on New Year's Eve 2029, what does Meta look like going into the 2030s? This is a dramatically different Meta than it would have been years ago.
So I was going to throw out one other thing. So they hired Hugo Barra in the past from Google. And as I recall, that guy amounted to very little. He was there and then he disappeared after like 2 years or something.
So he was at Google before he was at Xiaomi, but he was hired from Xiaomi. And he was there and he spearheaded Oculus Go, which was manufactured by Xiaomi. And so that Hugo Barra, I think, was brought in to do the deal there of getting Oculus Go as a $200 headset in 2018, which is, impressive for that date. And then he didn't amount to much because Oculus Go wasn't good enough because 3DOF was a bad idea, and in his own admission, it was a complete failure. I think that's a very different view. I think here, of course, it is possible, though. I don't know if you're suggesting, but it's possible this guy comes in and comes out with some crazy, stupid design that everyone hates, right?
No, it's not just that. It's also you let's say you come to a meeting with 3 other teams presenting 3 different visions, and Zuckerberg picks one of the 3, and you're like, I just spent 2 years here, I'm out, right? Like that is something that could happen in some, yeah.
Very much. That is interesting. Where does this, that's a really interesting take, actually. Does this all actually come together? Does it work? Is this guy able to integrate into the very different corporate environment of Meta than Apple, right? All these companies have their own vibe of things. I think it does. It's going to depend on what kind of freedom he's given, and is he overruled by executives, or is he able to just execute on a vision? I see someone in the comments saying, I just found out that Alan Dye, Apple's former UX designer, is working at Meta now. I don't know if you're time traveling, but that is actually the topic right here. That's this guy that we're talking about. I don't know if that was a joke, maybe.
Well, so the thing I was going to throw in here is it's not just that. So I brought up the Hugo Barra thing and that potentially worst case scenario for Meta avenue of it. But there is the best case scenario, which you outlined, right? Exiting the 2020s as a hardware company with the leading design ideas in the world, right? That's a best case scenario. There's a middle case scenario, right? And the middle case scenario is they just learned Apple's next 5-year product strategy. No matter they could send this guy off in a little boat into the ocean and he never does anything for Meta again. But I would have gotten out of him what the next 3 products are from Apple.
So legal questions about that aside, when you move from one company to another, it's very illegal to then spill trade secrets. Let's just pretend let's ignore the legal aspect.
What, David? You did this with Valve. If you imagined a Steam Frame Pro, what would it look like?
Look, I get that there are ways around this. But I think the bigger point is you can get that from someone a lot lower level than this guy. To build a product in 5 years, you have to start designing it and thinking and speccing it. You can get that out of a lot lower level people. In reality, these people, in Silicon Valley are all cross-pollinating, and they all really know what each other are doing anyway. Right? It's the same thing in AI. You have like houses where you have people from OpenAI and Google and Anthropic all living together and going to parties together and drinking together. Of course, they're going to talk about what they're doing. The secrecy thing is not as important as being able to compete with it, right? I don't actually think these companies are that often completely surprised. Apple's probably the best, and sorry, Valve is the best, followed by Apple, of keeping things relatively secret. But in general, they're all facing the same design constraints. They have similar supply chains. Some of them have exclusive supply chains, but they're similar. Fundamentally, you very rarely get something that's put together that's completely out of the blue. The last thing that was really like that was the iPhone, and that, Steve Jobs is not really comparable to any of the other executives around today. I don't think that's kind of a once in a very long time person that's put together teams like that and enforce secrecy at that level.
I agree and don't agree with part of what you said. You're right about what they could get from the lower level, but I think what they get from this level is his knowledge of 5 years of planning on the. You said that their supply lines aren't too differentiated, but Apple has a whole lot of metal products that they develop in a very specific way to Apple things,
Sure,
with a whole global supply chain to get them those metal products. That Meta just bought a lot of expertise in those supply chains as well.
well, look, to be clear, this guy's the software guy, but I do understand, like, this is someone who is in a lot of these boardroom meetings. It is the biggest defection we've ever seen. Defection's not the right word, but you know what I'm saying. From Apple to Meta, there's never been someone at this level who's gone to work at Meta Reality Labs, to be clear, this division. I saw someone earlier asking, why isn't he in charge of the rest of Meta's design, like for the Facebook and Instagram apps? I think because Meta is doing a lot better in those apps than Reality Labs. Reality Labs needs it, right? Reality Labs needs a strong design ethos. It needs to become part of Reality Labs' DNA. Everyone who uses a Quest headset today knows it. This company needs to prioritize design. That's why, you pointed out that I was showing the body language. Most of Mark Zuckerberg's quote there is mostly meaningless fluff, right? It's nonsense. It's buzzwords. But there's one sentence in there that matters, and it's, we are elevating design to be a core priority at Meta, not kind of this sidestep. That's a paraphrase, but that's basically what the sentence was saying.
Well, all right. So let's pair this as we start to close out this episode. Let's pair this to that previous article on 30% being laid off at Meta. What is this dude's budget, right? How many people is he going to bring from Apple in particular? Because that's where we get to the next phase of this, of like, anyone he wants to bring from Apple are going to ask him the exact same question. Come on, really? I don't want it. I chose not to go there for a reason. And now you're going to drag me over, right? Like, why? And he's going to have to make a case for that. And the case for that is usually, part of it's going to be money, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, we see that Mark Zuckerberg has entered this phase where he is spending, I don't know if you've seen some of these AI, there are people being paid billions of dollars. I think people are trying to figure out, and I think it is, but I don't think there are people currently trying to confirm, is Mark Zuckerberg's AI talent grab the most that an employee, like not just acquiring someone, has ever actually been paid to be hired? I think he has hit the world record. I don't think there's anyone that's ever been given a multi-billion-dollar salary before in that sense. Again, you can talk about the technicalities of equity and salary, but yes, I imagine that this guy's being paid a very, very, very large sum to do this, and that he is going to be offering some, as you say, some of the people who are there at Apple. To be clear, as I said in the start, he is bringing one of his sidekicks, not the right word.
Lieutenants was the word, that everyone is using, yeah.
Precisely, yes. He's bringing one of his lieutenants with him who was there for 9 years with him. And I imagine they are going to want to say, hey, why don't you come over here? Let's build the next wave, right? Apple's, whatever, they'll have their own narratives they spin.
The problem I have with using the lieutenant word is I think isn't Andrew Bosworth quite literally a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve?
Yeah, I think we can distinguish that though. But yeah, he is in the Army Reserve for like their digital push and stuff like that.
All right, yeah. So we've got metaphorical lieutenants and then literal lieutenants in the tech industry in the United States. Is that what I'm trying to point out?
Yeah, I see Barzan bring up a good point here that a lot of these contracts, especially in AI, are tied to results. So yes, in many, I do wonder. That's a thing I'd love to know. Does his pay contract say you have to ship a successful new design system in this area, or you have to. It's very hard to even quantify a design thing, I guess. Get us to a point where we have some sort of level of consistency. I would wonder how on earth do you quantify that when it's something like logistics. It's obviously reduce cost to this point, and bring our manufacturing efficiency to this and things like that. When it comes to AI, a lot of it is like you're able to ship a model that hits this benchmark. You ship a model, it hits this benchmark, or you're the third leading model in the world. When it comes to design, software design, user interface design, a lot harder to quantify. How do you do a user satisfaction survey and say, user satisfaction's at 62%, you get it to 82% in 3 years and you get $1 billion? I would love to see that contract.
Well, I was thinking about that with the AI guys, the AI $1 billion contracts. Like, I would imagine that $1 billion contract is, if it beats, Mark Zuckerberg saying, if it beats me at chess, not at chess, at the Turing test, then you get your $1 billion, right?
It could be like a coding benchmark or one of the like elite code or something like that. It's you pass a certain with the AI. They have these benchmarks that the industry is kind of obsessed with, so it's a lot more easy to do. I see Bars are making a very funny comment. Dictator 79 must say our new UI doesn't suck. Yes, so 30% fewer Meta's UI sucks comments, and this guy gets $1 billion.
Yeah, and LL saying that we were paid trillions of dollars to pretend that the Quest Pro wasn't leaked intentionally. It's a perfectly valid theory. Yeah. I'm loving our comments overall this week. They're very funny and laid back. It's really interesting to see the people that are ready to near the end of our comments. There's people saying, I killed all of my social media 4 years ago and I loved it, right? And they're talking about just they're here on this is social media, right? They're tuning into our show. So I appreciate that you've tuned into our version of social media as it is right now in 2025, and tuned out of those others where there's going to be people like already convinced that VR headsets are dead and having wrong takes on everything. And we just spent a couple hours here really breaking it down, didn't we?
Yeah, you could certainly argue that YouTube, if you were to just watch the videos of YouTube, maybe that's not social media. But if you engage in the comments, I would say you're still on social media. But maybe they mean meta social media, or maybe they just mean one that they're engaged with, their real friends, because then you kind of have this fake life you put up. There's all those kind of very valid philosophical arguments there.
I'm going to throw out there that it's not just social media that's hard. I'm going to call FaceTime social media, right? And so you have all of your contacts inside of FaceTime, or WhatsApp being another type of social media. Yes, it's private social media by default, but it's still your network of people that keep you attached to a certain set of technologies, and they're being used as levers to control your life going forward. And I want you to, I appreciate those people that are quitting and going outside of the ecosystems that control their lives. We're due for an incredibly complex period, right? APKs are growing outside of Android as Linux is growing outside of just being this thing that hackers know about. Like, Linux is a thing that runs probably millions of Steam Deck headsets already today, and you can go and access Linux directly inside of those machines. Everyone, we talk about the past a lot here on this show and the examples that we have in the past, but as soon as we bring up those examples, we always go, well, wait, those don't apply to now because of this, and this. And I think that's really important for us to balance on this show, because VR is not like any other medium. It is all encompassing, right? When I go into VR and I don't have my phone, I'm actually more likely to pull off the headset and go and use my phone because I still need my phone. And that's one object from reality that I need to have inside of VR with me. And
yeah. But again, we can get into that discussion. Do you want the apps from your phone? Do you want a virtual phone? Do you want your literal phone cut out and pass through there? I mean, God, that's an article there if we ever had time and we weren't getting flooded with news. The 3 ways you can bring your phone into VR.
Yes.
Apps. a virtual version, or literally your phone cut out and passed through. Those are the three ways.
Yes, and we're going to have all three next year, and each of them are going to be terrible and great in their own way, and we're going to want all three. Fantastic. We do need that article. Any comments there, David?
The question for you is Walkabout Mini Golf social media?
Yes. It's also, but you want to get me started on that. It's a place. It's not a game. It's a place we go to, and it's really important to me that it is a place. And so you could launch Walkabout right now on the Apple Vision Pro, but you couldn't launch Mini Golf. You could launch it as a place for us to go, and you would be there in the home screen, and maybe you have a hand gesture to teleport from place to place. But the moment you want to interact with anything, you need a 6DoF tracked object in your hand that's very accurately tracked in order for you to have a precise little tapping motion. And that could be a phone. That could be a controller. That could be a lot of things.
I do agree with you that when it comes to VR, the line between what we kind of call social VR and VR gaming is a lot more blurry than we would love to imagine. It would be great to categorize things so easily, but when you're in Rec Room playing paintball, are you in a VR game or are you on a social VR platform? And when you are just sitting around and walk about mini golf, talking to someone, and you're so engrossed in your conversation that you haven't actually bothered to play your hole for the past 3-5 minutes. Are you playing a VR game right now, or are you in a social VR space? Yeah, those lines are very, very blurry. And
social media sandwich. We saw someone in the comments asking that. I like that. If you're talking to someone, it is, right?
There's the comment I think we'll end the show with by not answering is Walkabout Mini Golf a metaverse?
No! All right, we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much.
We had fun. Talk to you later.
Thanks so much, everyone. We'll see you next week and see you in the future.